Not good. How is this possible? The remaining Forcer gods were extremely terrified, and they no longer had a relaxed expression like before. It should be known that they had even used the trump card killing formation of 9 cuts that they had prepared. However, in the end, Jian Wushuang had killed Mo Ying in the killing formation of 9 cuts. How can this happen? How can he disregard the killing formation of 9 cuts and kill Mo Ying? What kind of technique is this? The Forcer gods were filled with doubt. However, they did not know that the moon-picking skill that Jian Wushuang had used was the strongest secret skill of the ancient god clan, and it was really a very remarkable ability. This secret skill made use of the power of the universe, space and time. Moreover, no matter where it was, as long as space and time existed in the piece of void, Jian Wushuang could use it. The killing formation of 9 cuts could indeed block all kinds of attacks. However, these attacks were merely material-based attacks. As for the moon-picking skill, which was a secret skill which made use of the universe, space and time, the killing formation of 9 cuts was totally unable to block it. With the death of Mo Ying, the killing formation of 9 cuts had collapsed, and the devil 9 cuts with a great amount of murderous intent and power had dissipated at once. Jian Wushuang glowed with murderous intent. Die! With a shrill cry, the 2 Hongjun golden swords which Jian Wushuang controlled turned into 2 shooting stars and moved with frightening speed. They then pierced the void and headed to the Forcer gods with lightning speed. Upon seeing that, the Forcer gods revealed terrified expressions in succession. Even the killing formation of 9 cuts had been broken through. As such, the fighting capabilities of Jian Wushuang, who had gone all out, were not something that the 4 of them could stop. Run! Without hesitation, the Forcer gods started to escape. After all, they were all Sir God experts. Moreover, they were considered outstanding among the Sir gods. If the 4 of them really wanted to escape, it would be difficult for Jian Wushuang to get all of them to stay. Even though it was not possible to get the Forcer gods to stay, there was one person that Jian Wushuang absolutely had to keep. This person was Lei Chao. Swoosh! Jian Wushuang's body moved crazily, and his dark golden eyes stared persistently at Lei Chao, who was standing in the void. At that time, Lei Chao did not have a fearful expression at all. Since his soul had been controlled, he did not have his own consciousness since a long time ago. Hence, he was no different from being dead. Lei Chao! Jian Wushuang clenched both his fists tightly, and grief flashed in his heart. However, even more determination flashed in his heart. I will definitely avenge you. Please leave peacefully. Jian Wushuang spoke softly and pointed out one of his fingers from his right hand. A flittering light shot out, and its speed was so fast that it was not an attack that Lei Chao could dodge. Moreover, Lei Chao did not dodge at all. The flittering light pierced through the space between Lei Chao's eyebrows and took his life. Jian Wushuang appeared beside Lei Chao. With a swing of his hands, he put Lei Chao's lifeless body into his Qian Kuan ring. After finishing that, Jian Wushuang sighed deeply, and his heart felt extremely heavy. As Lei Chao's consciousness had been controlled, he was as good as dead. If he were to continue living like a puppet, it would be a humiliation and torture to him. As such, after knowing that, Jian Wushuang had made up his mind a long time ago to free Lei Chao. Acheron Palace. Jian Wushuang clenched both his fists tightly, and his eyes were filled with an infinite amount of murderous intent and fury. Jian Wushuang, the world has always been cruel. Please try to get over this. Moreover, now is not the time for you to grieve. The king of venomous worms' voice echoed in Jian Wushuang's mind. I know. Jian Wushuang nodded his head, and his eyes were icy cold. The king of venomous worms was right. The current moment was not the time for him to grieve, because he himself could be killed by someone at any time. The Acheron Palace's way of doing things has always been very secretive, and they will not take action easily. However, the moment they take action, they will definitely have absolute confidence. Jian Wushuang's eyes squinted. However, what I have come across so far is unable to force me into a hopeless situation. The Acheron Palace has definitely arranged for something else. Since entering the dark storm, Jian Wushuang had encountered 3 waves of danger. The first wave was the assassination attempt by the ugly-looking woman at the start. The assassination was extremely frightening and Jian Wushuang was almost killed. The second wave came from Lei Chao where he tossed 2 god-destroying pearls abruptly. Fortunately, Jian Wushuang had always been careful and he was prepared for it. If not, he would have ended up in an extremely miserable state. As for the third wave, it was the 5 Sir Gods attacking at the same time and they even had used the killing formation of 9 cuts. These 3 waves of danger were extremely perilous, and they had indeed forced Jian Wushuang to go all out by making him unleash many of his trump cards and techniques. However, such an extent was still not considered perfectly safe. Hence, Jian Wushuang could confirm that the Acheron Palace still had the 4th wave of attack. The 4th wave of attack would be even more dangerous than the 3 waves of attacks from before. What will the 4th wave of attack be? Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. In no time he knew about it. Jian Wushuang was still standing at the battlefield from before, which was inside the dark storm. As for the 4 Sir Gods who deployed the killing formation of 9 cuts to kill him, they had escaped originally. However, at that time they headed toward Jian Wushuang again. Moreover, it was not just the 4 of them. At the center of the 4 of them, there was a shadow which was covered by a crimson robe. Under the escort of the 4 Sir Gods, the crimson-robed man walked out slowly and appeared in front of Jian Wushuang openly. After that, he stopped moving. At that moment, Jian Wushuang's expression became unusually ugly. An emperor god. An emperor god expert. The corners of Jian Wushuang's mouth were a bit distorted, and he could not help but exclaim in admiration. As expected of the Acheron Palace, they would not take action easily. However, if they were to take action, they would definitely not fail. This rumor was really true. After sending 5 Sir Gods to team up and deploy the killing formation of 9 cuts, it was still not enough. They had actually secretly arranged for another emperor god. It was an emperor god. It was the level of the Star Palace Master as well as King Luozhen, who was an 8-star ancient god. Although there seemed to be only 1 step between an emperor god and a Sir God, the gap between them was not smaller than the gap between a real god and Sir God. For example, the Devil 9 cuts from before, which was only just created with 5 Sir Gods teaming up under the aid of the killing formation of 9 cuts, possessed the fighting capabilities of an emperor god. However, the Devil 9 cuts had only achieved the level of an emperor god in terms of strength, power, and other areas. However, when comparing close-quarters techniques, trump cards, and secret skills, it was completely incomparable to an actual emperor god. However, even though that was the case, it was still not something that Jian Wushuang could fight with. He could only rely on his own close-quarters combat abilities to deal with the Devil 9 cuts. After that, he had found an opportunity to kill Mo Ying, who had deployed the formation. With that, the Devil 9 cuts had dissipated by itself. As for a real emperor god expert, he was many times stronger than the Devil 9 cuts. Moreover, the emperor god in front of him did not look normal. Looks like this time around, it will not be as simple as just going all out. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and with a flip of his palm, a picture scroll appeared in his hands. As Jian Wushuang tossed the picture scroll into the void, the big universe started to undergo changes right away. 5 Sir Gods teamed up and set up the killing formation of 9 cuts but couldn't kill you. On the contrary, you killed one of us instead. Jian Wushuang, you are much stronger than we, Acheron Palace, imagined. Luckily, we of Acheron Palace have prepared room for a maneuver. A creepy and hoarse voice was heard from the person in the crimson robe. As his voice reverberated, the person in the crimson robe flipped his palm and took out a crimson token. The crimson token gave out a strange aura. As the person in the crimson robe clenched, pack. The token broke and a billowing strength covered Jian Wushuang instantly. This is... Jian Wushuang's eyes fixed and his consciousness slowly immersed. It was as though he almost fell asleep. Jian Wushuang, quickly wake up. This is a soul control trick. Quickly wake up. King of Venomous Worms' roar of fear and anger rang in Jian Wushuang's head. The vigorous soul fire in Jian Wushuang's sea of consciousness was burning, and there was a sharp ache that suddenly hit him. Jian Wushuang's eyes dilated with horror and his features turned ferocious. You want to conduct soul control on me? Dream! Jian Wushuang was roaring in madness as he tried to shake off the unique situation. After a while, everything settled down. Jian Wushuang continued to stand there as he panted. His face grew unusually solemn. It seems like I failed. The person in the crimson robe glanced at Jian Wushuang and he sneered. But that's right. After all, he's an inverse cultivator. He nurtured his soul fire long ago. He naturally wouldn't be as easy to control as Lei Chao. Bastard. There was billowing murderous intention in Jian Wushuang's eyes. He could tell that Lei Chao was soul-controlled by the person in the crimson robe before him. However, soul control wasn't something he could perform, and it was only contained in the token. The person in the crimson robe only played a guiding role. To be able to save a soul attack in a token and activate it by another person, and it still could control Lei Chao, who is an expert on Real God ranking list. The person who performed the soul control is much stronger than I imagined. King of Venomous Worms said. Previously, King of Venomous Worms had thought the expert who performed soul control would be an emperor god who was good at soul attacks. However, from the looks of it, he wouldn't be an ordinary emperor god. As I couldn't soul control you, I have to kill you personally. The person in the crimson smiled leisurely, and there was another crimson trident in his hand. Go! The person in the crimson robe waved his hand, and the crimson trident quivered suddenly and charged at Jian Wushuang. The stab brought about boundless power of the universe, and crimson light flooded in. It was terrifyingly dark. Jian Wushuang felt that he was locked in on by the trident. No matter how he dodged, even if he ran to the end of the world, he wouldn't be able to dodge the trident's attack. In particular, the terrifying power that the trident contained made Jian Wushuang's hair stand. Ancient God unique skill, 8 divine mountains. Jian Wushuang bellowed, and the divine power in his body flowed out. He broke 3 ancient god stars, and the increased boundless ancient god power had yet to disperse. But then, it was venting out like a tsunami. Bang! 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 8 lofty golden sacred mountains appeared from nowhere. Every sacred mountain was lofty and far bigger than before. It formed 8 layers of barriers in front of Jian Wushuang. It was the strongest defense unique skill of ancient god tribe. It was performed by Jian Wushuang after he broke 3 stars. It was powerful enough for a Sir God to feel hopeless. However, the crimson trident hit the 8 golden sacred mountains directly. Bang! 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 8 continuous bangs, and the 8 lofty sacred mountains only hindered the trident for a while before it pierced them. The crimson trident that contained shocking power flew at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang's face changed. Then there was Sirai that shot out like lightning. King of Venomous Worms' body reappeared again and instantly formed a huge net. Hong! The huge net shattered and countless Sirai strangled into pieces. There were parts of King of Venomous Worms' body that were torn apart as well. However, the trident's power remained as it flew at Jian Wushuang. There was a chilly gleam in Jian Wushuang's eyes. He gripped Blood Mountain's sword in his hand tightly. Then a boundless divine power flowed out and he slashed. Dang! There was a loud thud and Jian Wushuang's body shook vigorously. Blood Mountain's sword nearly fell out of his hand as he moved backwards from the impact. He took a dozen steps back before he steadied himself again. After he stopped, there was blood flowing out of the corner of his mouth. He's too strong. This is the power of an emperor god. Jian Wushuang was astonished. He gave his all and broke 3 stars to perform 8 divine mountains. However, they were instantly pierced while the defense skill that King of Venomous Worms had performed was broken down directly as well. Then, the stroke that he had cast with full force flew off as well and he was injured. It was merely a casual hit by the person in the crimson robe. His one hit was so powerful? No way. An ordinary emperor god won't be this powerful. He is definitely an expert among emperor gods. King of Venomous Worms' voice was heard in Jian Wushuang's head, and his voice was solemn. Experts among emperor gods? Jian Wushuang muttered. He subconsciously looked at the crimson trident in the person in the crimson robe's hand. Then his eyes dilated with shock. An emperor god using a crimson trident? And it is so powerful. Shuegu! You are Emperor God Shuegu! Jian Wushuang shouted. Hee hee. It seems like you recognized me. The person in the crimson robe let out a burst of strange laughter but didn't deny it. "It's really him." Jian Wushuang's face immediately grew grave. He had been in Sanctuary Alliance for so long and he had a simple understanding of the Almighty's in eternal chaotic world. He did that so that when he was wandering outside, he could identify those who were more powerful and make a move earlier, in order to minimize the possibility of having a conflict. Among the Almighty's in eternal chaotic world, there was Emperor God Xuegu. Emperor Xuegu kept himself to himself and he was evil in disposition. He was truly a devil, but he happened to be terrifyingly powerful. Among Emperor gods, he wasn't at the top, but he was in the middle upper range. The divine weapon that Emperor God Xuegu was using was the Crimson Trident. He was the only one among Emperor gods in eternal chaotic world that used a strange divine weapon like the Crimson Trident. Hence, when Jian Wushuang saw the Crimson Trident, he recognized him immediately. No wonder Emperor God Xuegu rejected Sanctuary Alliance's invitation so many times, and he was even too lazy to bother with Sanctuary Alliance. He turned out to be Acheron Palace's man. Jian Wushuang was terrified and angry. "Since you have recognized me, all the more you have to die." Emperor God Xuegu's eyes were filled with an infinite amount of murderous intent. He was someone from the Acheron Palace, and this was a secret that no one knew. However, at that time, Jian Wushuang knew about it. Die! Boom! A frightening aura rose from Emperor God Xuegu's body, and the whole universe turned into a sea of blood that was filled with countless skeletons in an instant. As for Emperor God Xuegu, he was the emperor who ruled the sea of blood. He was holding his crimson trident with one hand tightly. Similarly, the trident was filled with a great amount of vigor and the void shook wildly. After that, the crimson trident attacked again. This time around, when the crimson trident attacked, it increased in size at the same time and it looked like a trident that could destroy the world. Comparing powers, it was many times stronger than before. Upon seeing that, an unprecedented amount of madness glowed within Jian Wushuang's eyes. His ancient god body was standing in the void proudly. At that moment, his right hand slapped his own forehead again. It should be known that of the 6 ancient god stars in the space between his eyebrows, he had already destroyed 3 of them previously. The star destruction skill was a secret skill used by ancient gods to allow them to go all out. If only 1 or 2 stars were destroyed, it would be easy to restore them. However, if 3 stars were destroyed, it would be more difficult to restore them. However, slap, slap, slap. Sounds that sounded like constellations bursting could be heard repeatedly. At that moment, the 3 remaining ancient god stars in the space between Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were destroyed at the same time. In addition to the 3 stars that had been destroyed previously, Jian Wushuang had destroyed all 6 stars. It was obvious that Jian Wushuang had given his all. He wanted to fight to the death. "Come!" A furious roar came out of Jian Wushuang's mouth, and it reverberated across the big universe. With all 6 stars destroyed, Jian Wushuang's ancient god power rose again to a completely new level instantly. Such a stage, combined with Jian Wushuang's stage 2 ultimate real god's divine power, made his divine power similar to that of a normal emperor god. Rumble. A great amount of divine power moved about and it gathered at the index finger of Jian Wushuang's right hand. At that time, the index finger of his right hand had completely become a crystal jade and the crystal jade was dark gold in color. Ancient God's 7th finger. Vault of Heaven's finger. Jian Wushuang opened his mouth and he was extremely imposing. All of a sudden, the index finger of his right hand, which had completely changed into a crystal jade, was pointed. The instant it was pointed out, the void in front of him burst open and a space vortex which covered tens of thousands of miles appeared from it. The space vortex was twisting everything in the universe and even the dark storm at the side twisted mercilessly. Russell, more than half of the space storm, which originally covered the triangular island, was twisted instantly. The ancient god's finger, which was one of the ancient god clan's 4 unique skills, contained a total of 9 fingers and every finger was more shocking than before. Just the 6th finger, the sun corrosion finger, was already earth-shaking. For the 7th finger, it would be very difficult for even 7-star ancient gods to use it under normal circumstances. Similarly, Jian Wushuang could not use it previously. It was not until all his 6 stars were destroyed and that his ancient god power rose greatly like never before that he could use the 7th finger for real. The Vault of Heaven's finger. A finger that could destroy the Vault of Heaven. A giant, dark golden finger came out from the space vortex which covered tens of thousands of miles, and it clashed head-on with the incoming crimson trident which had expanded crazily right away. With the clash, there were no violent booming sounds like before. However, the instant both attacks clashed, millions of miles of the surrounding void were torn apart into pieces. For example, the dark storm which had already been hit to the point that it almost fell apart was torn into pieces at that moment. In addition, the whole triangular island was completely exposed. In the void, 2 shocking powers were still opposing each other crazily. However, all of a sudden, boom! A great amount of aura descended from the void on top abruptly. Emperor God Shui Gu's expression changed. After that, he raised his head abruptly and saw that the Vault of Heaven on top had undergone some changes for some reason. The Vault of Heaven had already changed into an extremely beautiful world. The world contained mountains, rivers, birds singing, and the fragrance of flowers. The most eye-catching thing was the 9 lofty continents that existed within the world. For the 9 lofty continents, each of them was extremely huge and vast, and the supreme aura that it emitted caused even Emperor God Shui Gu to be slightly fearful. This is a chaos divine treasure. Emperor God Shui Gu's eyes shrank. Chaos divine treasures were the most powerful and valuable treasures in the eternal chaotic world. Even almighties and real gods did not have the right to possess them. For example, many Sir-gods, which included some Sir-gods with weaker abilities, did not have the right to possess a chaos divine treasure. As for Emperor God Shui Gu himself, he possessed a chaos divine treasure, and it was the crimson trident in his hands. The trident was extremely powerful, and with its power, Emperor God Shui Gu could be said to be someone powerful among the Emperor gods. However, the trident was merely an attack-type divine weapon. Among many kinds of divine weapons, attack-type divine weapons were no doubt worth the least. However, the extremely beautiful continent which had appeared on top had caused Emperor God Shui Gu's eyes to become scorching hot. It's indeed a chaos divine treasure. Moreover, it's a kind of chaos divine treasure that is extremely special, and it is worth so much that it is shocking. Emperor God Shui Gu shook. He knew how valuable chaos divine treasures were. For his trident, he had paid a huge price for it. He had obtained it by luck after experiencing many life and death situations when he had entered a battlefield deep inside the second layer. Even though it was only an attack-type divine weapon, it was still enough to make many almighties envious of him. However, for the chaos divine treasure that Jian Wushuang took out, looking at its worth alone, it was worth at least 10 times more than his crimson trident. Haha! This is really not a wasted trip. Emperor God Shui Gu was extremely excited. His eyes, which were looking at Jian Wushuang, became filled with even more murderous intent. You wish to kill me and snatch my treasure away? Jian Wushuang could see through Emperor God Shui Gu's thoughts completely, and he grinned hideously. That will depend on whether you can survive this. Mountain River Map. Mountain River as palm and 9 province as seal. Jian Wushuang uttered every word with a pause, and every word contained a special demonic power. In the vast vault of heaven, within the world of the picture scroll which contained a total of 9 lofty continents, one of the continents was as if it were completely alive, and it freed itself from the world of the picture scroll. After that, it descended slowly. Rumble, the universe shook, and all beings trembled with fear. This power, even if it were Emperor God Shui Gu, when he saw the continent that was descending, his eyes became filled with fear. 9 province of the universe. Qing province as the seal. First seal. Split the heavens. Boom! The lofty continent descended completely. Mountain River Map. The first seal of the 9 seals of 9 province had descended. In a split second, all the living creatures in the world submitted themselves. Ha! Interesting. There was excitement shimmering in Emperor God Shui Gu's eyes. He noticed the terrifying power contained in the lofty continent. Not only was he not afraid, he was filled with excitement. The stronger the power of the lofty continent represented, the more amazing the Chaos Divine Treasure was. And he definitely has to get a hold of the Chaos Divine Treasure. Secret skill of bloodthirst, ternary in one breath. Emperor God roared, and there were 3 huge, lofty shadows of exotic beast. The 3 shadows were unique, but they shared a similarity. They were all soaring with rage. The crimson trident in his hand let out 3 different powers simultaneously. Suddenly the power burst out. Heaven and earth were instantly silent. In the unprecedented silence, the lofty continent that was descending from the sky collided with the crimson trident. Rumble. Heaven fell and the earth was raised. The huge triangle island below Jian Wushuang and Emperor God Shuegu started falling and immersed under the sea. The island vanished into thin air along with the dark storm. The 4 figures in black robe were in the void far away. They felt the collision of 2 terrifying power, and the 4 Sir Gods revealed a terrified expression. However, just as Jian Wushuang exchanged blows with Emperor God Shuegu using Mountain River map, at the bottom of the sea in the vast Buddhist demon sea, a young man's consciousness, which was asleep for God knows how long, suddenly woke up with a start. This is the aura of 9-province continent. 9-province continent that was refined and made into treasure many years ago. It was in the hands of 7-star Black Sect, and it was named Mountain River Map. 7-star Black Sect's Mountain River Map appeared here? Haha. God is helping me. Go. Kill all of the nonentities and bring back all their treasures. An ancient voice spoke, and a black shadow departed from the deep ends of Buddhist demon sea at an unbelievably fast speed, in the direction of Jian Wushuang and Emperor God Shuegu. They remained in the void above the Triangle Island, but the Triangle Island had already vanished into thin air. The 2 terrifying power were clashed vigorously and shook the earth. But suddenly, the 3 rays of crimson light burst out like 3 bloody suns that swept out all hindrances. The lofty continent that descended from the scroll-painting world, although it was magnificent, cracked into 3 parts under the massive hit of 3 bloody suns and shattered completely. The sight made Jian Wushuang's expression grow distressed. He didn't perform Mountain River Map often, but every time he performed it, it never disappointed him. But then, the first seal of Mountain River Map that he had performed with his all was broken apart by his enemy. Emperor God Shuegu lives up to his name. Jian Wushuang couldn't help but compliment. However, he didn't feel hopeless. 9 province 9 seals, and he was merely performing the first seal then. One should know that his divine power was great, and he had already broken 6 ancient god stars. Then, he was already qualified to perform the second seal. The last trump card. Jian Wushuang's eyes were flashing, and he fixed his gaze upon Emperor God Shuegu. At the next moment, the vast power of stars instantly swept out from his body. Secret skills of Star Palace was finally cast. Secret skills of Star Palace, River Mountain Map, Star Destruction skill were all his biggest trump cards. He wouldn't perform those techniques hastily. But then Jian Wushuang spared nothing. 9 province of the universe, you province as the seal, hack the earth. Terrifying divine power billowed. Rumble. Heaven and earth shook vigorously. From the sky in the beautiful scroll painting, there was another lofty continent that descended. The lofty continent was much bigger than the first. It was much loftier and more imposing. It was far beyond the first piece of the continent, far stronger. 9 province 9 seals. First split the heavens. Secondly hack the earth. One was supposed to be stronger than another seal. Most importantly, the second seal was backed up with the power of stars. Jian Wushuang performed the second episode of Secret Skill of Star Palace with all his strength. In an instant, the order of Heaven Way seemed to be breaking apart. Under the Hack the Earth seal, Emperor God Shuegu, who had been smiling madly, finally stiffened. In the distant void, the 4 Sir God experts turned pale. Even though they were far away, they could feel the power contained in the Hack the Earth seal. The power struck fear in them, and they were shivering hopelessly. It's impossible for him to be that strong. Emperor God Shuegu's hair instantly stood and his face distorted in agony. Hong! 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 Emperor God Shuegu's body let out 3 roars. Then he spat a mouthful of blood. His blood wasn't red but a scalding gold. The mouthful of scalding gold blood fell onto his crimson trident. Then, the crimson trident instantly became unusually violent. Drive weapon with blood. Slaughter a god with 100 ghosts. Secret skill. Ternary splits heaven and earth. Hong! A terrifying power suddenly exploded from the crimson trident. Emperor God Shuegod had boundless divine power and energy flow out of his body. Obviously, Emperor God Shuegu gave his all too. Kill! A loud roar that sounded like it was outside the highest heavens struck fear into them. The 3 tips of the crimson trident flooded with crimson light. The crimson trident suddenly increased in size. It was originally the size of an ordinary divine weapon, but it grew in size by tens of thousands of times and became an unbelievable mountain. The 3 resplendent yet enchanting crimson lights burst out and hit the lofty continent that descended brutally. Life or death depends on this hit. Jian Wushuang looked determined, and there was unprecedented insanity on his face. He already flashed all his trump cards and skills. He had to brew his strongest hit. If the hit were to kill Emperor God Shuegu, he would be able to live. On the contrary, if Emperor God Shuegu were to survive the hit, he would definitely die. Emperor God Shuegu was as mad as he was. He obviously knew of the situation as well. Their lives and deaths were decided by the last hit. It was either life or death in a split second. In the void, the crimson trident that grew to the size of a mountain collided with the lofty continent that descended. Bang! The space-time instantly paused. The yin and yang crisscrossed, and the universe fell apart. A black hole that covered the expanse of 1,000,000 miles appeared from nowhere. The black hole swallowed everything in the universe with no mercy. The 4 Sir Gods afar revealed an unprecedentedly terrified expression in that moment as they could feel the horror of the black hole. If they weren't far off, the black hole could totally strangle them to death. The space black hole, which spread across millions of miles, disappeared and the universe regained its peace gradually. Everything had come to an end. Jian Wushuang was standing at the void, and he had a ghastly pale expression. The level of the mountain river map was too high. If he had only unleashed the first move, it would still be all right. However, Jian Wushuang had unleashed the second move at all costs. Although he had unleashed it forcefully, it still placed a huge burden on his body. The current him only felt that all his internal organs were damaged and he was in extreme pain. However, Jian Wushuang couldn't care less about his own injuries. His eyes were glowing brilliantly, and he was staring persistently at the void in front of him. He was looking at the position that Emperor God Shuegu was in previously. When he saw the void and that Emperor God Shuegu's body was still standing there, his body shook fiercely. Not dead. Jian Wushuang clenched both his fists, and he was filled with an infinite amount of dissatisfaction. He had already given it his all by unleashing all his trump cards as well as techniques and staking everything on one attack. However, in the end, Emperor God Shuegu was still not dead yet. As expected of an Emperor God expert, Jian Wushuang laughed with grief. Jian Wushuang, run away quickly! The king of venomous worms' fierce roar echoed in Jian Wushuang's mind. However, Jian Wushuang was in agony. When did he not wish to run away? If he were able to run away, he would have done so a long time ago. If not, why would he stay behind and stake everything on one attack to fight it out with Emperor God Shuegu? The most important thing was that it was impossible for him to run away. His abilities were not too bad, and if he were to use the secret skill of Dragon Blood, his speed would surpass many Sir Gods. However, in front of an Emperor God, his speed was considered insignificant. He also knew that Emperor God Shuegu had always been proficient in speed to begin with. Moreover, the Crimson Trident in Emperor God Shuegu's hands could lock onto time and space. Hence, this would absolutely not give him any opportunity to escape. Under such circumstances, there was no way for him to escape. There was no way previously. Present, there was no way as well. In front of Jian Wushuang, Emperor God Shuegu was indeed not dead. However, he looked extremely miserable. The crimson robe on his body was filled with blood. His face was deathly pale like paper, and his aura had decreased greatly. It was obvious that he was seriously injured as well. However, under such circumstances, Emperor God Shuegu was neither terrified nor furious. Instead, he was extremely excited and delighted. Haha, Jian Wushuang, I really did not expect you to actually have such a nature-defying treasure. You are merely a real god. To allow a real god to unleash such frightening power to the point that it almost killed me. This treasure is 100 times more valuable than my trident. No, it's 1,000 times, 10,000 times. I am very grateful to you for giving me such a wonderful treasure. Hence, I will let you die immediately. Emperor God Shuegu was roaring madly, and the crimson trident in his hands glowed with a dazzling scarlet color. He then moved his legs and approached Jian Wushuang slowly. Is this the end? Jian Wushuang muttered, and his eyes were filled with hopelessness. The king of venomous worms, who was in his body, went silent as well. The king of venomous worms knew that Jian Wushuang had already reached his limit. He had already unleashed all his moves and trump cards. In addition, the star power, as well as the power he gained from destroying all his 6 ancient god stars, were completely depleted from using the seal back then. If the current him were to face Emperor God Shuegu again, he would not have any power to resist. However, all of a sudden, wait! The king of venomous worms gave a shrill cry. Jian Wushuang's eyes also shrank fiercely, and he looked at Emperor God Shuegu. All of a sudden, the black and boundless sea surface behind Emperor God Shuegu rose. A black shadow then appeared out of thin air, and it was right behind Emperor God Shuegu. Emperor God Shuegu seemed to have noticed it as well, and he turned his body immediately. After turning his body, his eyes became filled with shock. What he saw was a large, fierce-looking mouth that had already opened. The fierce-looking mouth contained 2 sharp, cold and long protruding teeth. Moreover, the big mouth was right in front of him, and it headed toward him. No! Emperor God Shuegu roared extremely loudly like never before. Although he tried to struggle with all his might to escape, he was still unable to. When the fierce-looking mouth closed, Emperor God Shuegu's body disappeared completely, and what replaced him was a huge, pitch-black head. The head was filled with black scales, and it looked like a dragon as well as a snake at the same time. In addition, there was also 1 horn on its head. This is a flood dragon from the ancient past. A terrified and astonished voice came from the king of venomous worms. The king of venomous worms was a full-foot plenilune, which was a supreme existence of the plenilune clan. However, when it saw the pitch-black enormous monster in front of it, it was horrified from the bottom of its heart. A flood dragon from the ancient past. An extremely frightening existence. As soon as it appeared, there was no room for Emperor God Shuegu to struggle at all, and he was killed right away. Such a scene was seen clearly by Jian Wushuang and the 4 Sir Gods who were in a void not too far away. At once, the 5 of them became extremely frightened. Run! Run away quickly! There is no room for Emperor God Shuegu to struggle at all. This is too frightening. The 4 black-robed Sir Gods did not hesitate at all, and they turned around to escape madly at once. All of them had also unleashed their speed to the best of their abilities. However, the moment they moved, the giant head of the flood dragon which had appeared from the sea surface also turned around at once. At the same time, it opened its big mouth again. Buzz! Shockingly cold air spread across the area and covered the whole universe in an instant. It had also covered the 4 Sir Gods. Originally, the 4 Sir Gods were escaping with all their might. Moreover, the 4 of them had split up. However, all of a sudden, the 4 of them stopped moving in midair. The 4 of them opened their eyes wide, and they were filled with an infinite amount of fear. However, a layer of frost had already covered their bodies, and the frost spread continuously. In the end, the 4 of them were turned into ice sculptures. When a simple air current passed by, the 4 ice sculptures broke into pieces at once and dissipated across the universe. With just one face-off, not even a fragment of the 4 Sir Gods who had besieged Jian Wushuang previously remained. After that, the giant head of the ancient flood dragon looked at Jian Wushuang fiercely. The pair of eyes on its head, which were glowing with a thin layer of gray light, then locked on to Jian Wushuang hastily like 2 electric arcs. Murderous intent also flashed past its eyes. Whoosh! Jian Wushuang did not see how the flood dragon moved at all. However, the flood dragon had already appeared in front of him. At the same time, it opened its fierce-looking mouth again, and its target this time around was Jian Wushuang. Just like Emperor God Shuigu, Jian Wushuang did his best to escape. However, at the instant the flood dragon opened its mouth, Jian Wushuang realized that the space and time that he was in had been completely sealed off. His body was also frozen and he could not move at all. He could only look on as the head of the flood dragon headed toward him. "Am I going to die?" Jian Wushuang murmured. "Since I am about to die, it is better for me to die in the hands of this ancient flood dragon rather than at the hands of the experts of the Acheron Palace. However, it's a pity that I have not found Lang Ruxue and rescued Shuang'er yet. In addition, I have also not found out about Master's real identity. And I'm going to die just like this." How dissatisfying! Bang! The shockingly loud bang wasn't the noise from Jian Wushuang being eaten by the ancient flood dragon. It was the noise of a fierce hit on the flood dragon's head. It then immersed itself under the sea. What? Jian Wushuang, who was originally hopeless, opened his eyes widely and watched everything that happened before his eyes in shock. He saw a blurry figure in the void before him. The figure was about 10,000 zhang tall. It was enormously huge. Although he couldn't see the appearance clearly, he reckoned that it should be an elderly from the outline of the figure. But who was the elderly? When did he appear? Roar! An angry roar that sounded like a dragon's roar shook heaven and earth vigorously. It stirred up billowing waves in the entire surface of Dark Sea region, and the ancient flood dragon revealed itself. Its huge body was not only one size bigger than King of Venomous Worm. The huge head was extremely ferocious, while its faint gray pupils were covered in coldness and murderous intention, and it was looking at the huge shadow that was 10,000 zhang tall. Hee, little thing. You do not deserve to make me take action personally. Let the one behind you come out. The blurry shadow that embodied an elderly let out a hearty laugh. His laughter was heard from all directions, and it contained a unique magic power. As his voice stopped, crack! In the vast void, there was suddenly a huge black hand that pierced through. It was huge and towering like a boundless mountain. Then, a shadow that was 10,000 zhang tall stepped out of the black hole and stood opposite the blurry elderly in the distance. The moment the black shadow appeared, the ancient flood dragon that was giving out a chilliness immediately became tame. Obviously, the black shadow was the master of the ancient flood dragon. What are all these? Jian Wushuang was surprised. He knew clearly that the ancient flood dragon could kill an emperor god easily, and it was not something he could match evenly. But then, there were suddenly two blurry shadows that were 10,000 zhang tall and much scarier than the ancient flood dragon. The two shadows were obviously substantiated with consciousness but not their original bodies. However, as they stood there, Jian Wushuang felt that besides Long Qi and his master that he had come across in the independent space in the 8th lair back then, there was no one in the whole world that could win against him. But why would the shadows of the superb existences suddenly appear in Buddhist Demon Sea? Jian Wushuang was quivering in fear, and he stayed behind the shadow of the elderly. He didn't dare to move an inch. King of Venomous Worms in his body was frightened and remained silent too. "One-star man, you old man, you are awakened too," the blurry shadow said under black armor while the ancient flood dragon stayed by his side. His deep voice reverberated in Buddhist Demon Sea, and it stirred stormy waves all over Buddhist Demon Sea. "Ha ha! In the same region, as you are awakened, how can I continue to stay asleep?" The blurry shadow that the elder took the form of, also known as the one-star man, burst out into a hearty laugh. "So what if you woke up? I'm killing these few non-entities. What does it have to do with you?" The shadow in black armor asked coldly. "You can kill anyone else, but the young man behind me has Mountain River map and he knows the secret skill of 7-star. He definitely shared a relationship with 7-star Black Sect. Do you think I'll let you kill him?" One-star man laughed. "You won't and I can't kill him?" The shadow in a black armor let his murderous intention bellow. As he finished his sentence, he took a huge stride forward. With just one step, Jian Wushuang felt as though he had traversed two different eras. The shadow in black armor appeared in front of the blurry shadow that the one-star man took the form of. Then he simply punched. On the other hand, one-star man waved his hand casually. Bang! There was a loud bang and the universe broke apart. The huge sea that covered an expanse of tens of millions of miles instantly sunk in, and it sunk all the way down to the bottom of the sea. It even revealed the reefs in the seabed. There were countless tsunamis, and every single wave was more than 1,000,000 zhang high as it dispersed in all directions madly. Jian Wushuang was right in the middle of the tsunami, and he felt the tsunami shattering everything like breaking dead wood. It stirred a commotion up in his heart as well. Merely a brief hit had caused such unbelievable power. Just how strong were the two people that were fighting? The experts of great emperor level in eternal chaotic world were nothing? Jian Wushuang muttered. Plus, the two of them hadn't come in person but merely in the form of shadow that they had substantiated temporarily. Bang! 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 The roars spread over continuously, and every roar came with boundless waves. The vigorous battle between the two made the universe seem to pale into insignificance. If one wasn't the level of great emperor, he couldn't even think of getting involved in such a vigorous battle. Just like Jian Wushuang, forget about getting involved, he couldn't even open his eyes when he was in the boundless tsunami. He could only feel the boundless power explode madly. One-star man, you really want to go against me? An angry voice roared through the universe. Haha, so what if I go against you? It's not like we never fought before. Not only do I want to keep this young man alive, I also want to provide him with an opportunity to let him grow stronger faster. One-star man's voice was loud and clear. Young man, look closely. Jian Wushuang, who was in the boundless tsunami, forced his eyes open. As he opened his eyes, he happened to see a huge hand. A huge hand that seemed to press the entire sky, the entire universe. The huge hand was gray and it was blurry. Besides the boundless divine power that it contained, there was another kind of energy. The energy was the power of reincarnation. Constellation theurgy. Extermination palm of reincarnation. Rumble. The huge hand descended magnificently. Jian Wushuang was dumbfounded at the sight. He stared at the huge hand, and the huge hand continuously appeared in his head and continuously magnified in size. In the end, it was completely sealed in his memory. Hong! The power of the huge hand exploded, and the shadow in black armor knelt down from the slab. The shadow dispersed slightly. Bastard! A roar with boundless rage spread, and the shadow in black armor substantiated again. Black Scale, kill that boy! The shadow in black armor roared, while the ancient flood dragon that was fighting alongside him suddenly let out a chilly gleam. Then, the chilliness turned into an air current and froze the void. Then, it bypassed One-Star Man's huge shadow and shot at Jian Wushuang. Be careful! One-Star Man roared. Jian Wushuang's face changed. Jian Wushuang had seen with his own eyes that when the ancient flood dragon had released cold air from its mouth, the cold air had annihilated the four Sir Gods instantly. The cold air from the mouth of the ancient flood dragon was heading toward him. As its speed was too fast, Jian Wushuang had no way of dodging it, and he also did not have the ability to dodge it. The cold air covered his body instantly, and at that moment, it was as if the cold air wanted to freeze his body, mind and consciousness completely. He then trembled with fear from the bottom of his heart. Humph! Jian Wushuang snorted coldly. In such a situation which was of great concern to life and death, Jian Wushuang remained extremely calm like never before. His divine power rose madly, and it was as if a volcano had erupted. His divine power then blocked the corrosion from the coldness. The coldness was extremely powerful, and it destroyed Jian Wushuang's divine power easily. However, Jian Wushuang had a great amount of divine power. Jian Wushuang was an inverse cultivator, and he had also achieved the limit of Stage 2 Ultimate Real God, where he had already precipitated a total of 99 Ultimate Divine Power Water Droplets. With 99 Ultimate Divine Power Water Droplets, the amount of divine power that he possessed was many times more than that of an Emperor God. With such a great amount of divine power appearing continuously to replace the dissipated divine power, it hindered the coldness madly. At the same time, it was also depleting the power of the coldness continuously. I must block it at all costs. Jian Wushuang closed his eyes tightly, and he was roaring furiously in his heart. At the same time that his ultimate divine power was blocking the corrosion from the coldness, his divine power was also being depleted at a shocking speed. Such a rate of depletion was even faster than when he had unleashed the secret skill of dragon blood with his full power. After just a short amount of time, he had already depleted 90% of the ultimate divine power in his body. Finally, the coldness dissipated gradually. Jian Wushuang's body, which was close to being completely frozen, also turned back to normal slowly. I have blocked it. Jian Wushuang was panting heavily, and he still had lingering fears. It was 90% of his divine power. Although he had such a vast amount of divine power, he had still depleted 90% of it in one go to block the coldness. However, if it were someone else, for example, for the four gods who were killed by the coldness of the ancient flood dragon, their divine power would be less than 1/100th of Jian Wushuang's divine power. Hence, they would absolutely be unable to block the corrosion from the coldness. If it were an emperor god, he would be unable to block it as well. Only Jian Wushuang could block it with his vast amount of divine power. Even though that was the case, under the corrosion of the coldness, his internal organs had sustained great damage like never before. In addition, his body and mind were totally exhausted. He then spit out a big mouthful of blood. His aura had become extremely weak, and it was at rock bottom. He's actually not dead? The black armored shadow could not help but be surprised. As for the ancient flood dragon under him, it gave a roar and it seemed to be furious. The one-star man heaved a sigh of relief and said loudly, "Little kid, this battlefield is not a place that you can stay at. Let me send you out of here first. Don't resist." After speaking, a big hand from the giant shadow of the one-star man was swung out, and it headed toward Jian Wushuang straight away. Jian Wushuang naturally did not resist. Even if he wanted to resist, he did not have the ability to do so. In no time, he was grabbed by the one-star man's big hand. After that, "Go!" The one-star man gave a cry, and his big hand exerted a great amount of strength as though he was throwing a lance, and he threw Jian Wushuang out. A frightening amount of strength burst forth. Jian Wushuang then swept past the void and created a ray of light in his path. In a split second, he had disappeared from the battlefield. Upon seeing that, the black armored shadow could not help but be extremely furious. "Old man, today, I shall have a proper fight with you." A furious voice could be heard from the black armored shadow. "Haha, we are both shadows substantiated by consciousness, and we are also under many restrictions. Who is afraid of whom?" The one-star man was not fearful in the slightest. Two earth-shaking experts continued to have an intense battle in the Buddhist demon sea. In no time, the whole Buddhist demon sea was on the verge of collapsing. Whoosh! A flittering light flew by at an extremely frightening speed. The violent sound of him sweeping past the sky was accompanied by an infinite amount of strong winds. Hence, Jian Wushuang was unable to open his eyes at all. The speed was too fast. It was countless times faster than the speed that Jian Wushuang had escaped with when he had unleashed the secret skill of dragon blood with his full power. It should be known that his current speed was not unleashed by him. Instead, the speed came from the one-star man throwing him out. He even had no idea when he would stop. Thus, he could only resign himself to fate. Time passed by, and close to 7 minutes' time had passed. However, Jian Wushuang's body had still not come to a stop yet. At that time, he was already extremely far away from the battlefield from before. At the void, at the edge of the Buddhist demon sea in the 6th layer, there were 3 shadows moving about slowly. This is the edge of the Buddhist demon sea. The Buddhist demon sea is a great forbidden area of the 6th layer. While it is all right for us to travel at the edge, we must absolutely not enter it. A hale and hearty gray-robed old man explained. "I have heard of the Buddhist demon sea before as well. It is said that if a real god were to enter the Buddhist demon sea, he would definitely die. However, Sir God Qianlong, with your abilities, it should not be a problem for you to travel inside." The young man with slightly pale skin mocked. "Haha! Don't flatter me. I am certain of my own abilities. For the Buddhist demon core, if there is no need to, it is better to not go in randomly. The hale gray-robed old man who was Sir God Qianlong from the soaring Heaven King Palace laughed. As for the pale-skinned young man, he was real God Han Quan of the soaring Heaven King Palace. As for the last person, he was another real god of the soaring Heaven King Palace who was in the real god ranking list, and his name was real God Ing Yun. One Sir God and two experts from the real god ranking list. With such a lineup in the sixth layer, as long as they did not look for trouble by going into a forbidden area like the Buddhist Demon Sea, they could probably go anywhere they wanted. Then, whoosh! All of a sudden, a sound of something sweeping in the sky could be heard. Moreover, the sound was getting louder and louder. Eh? Sir God Qianlong and the two other people looked at the source of the sound immediately. They then saw a flittering light being shot out from the Buddhist Demon Sea with a shocking speed by chance. The flittering light was moving at an extremely fast speed, and it swept past the void beside the three of them in an instant. This is... Sir God Qianlong and the two other people opened their eyes wide. What a fast speed. What is that flittering light from just now? Real God Han Quan said, dumbfounded. The speed of the flittering light was too fast. It was so fast that all of them, including Sir God Qianlong, did not manage to get a clear look at what exactly it was. With such a fast speed and that it came from within the Buddhist Demon Sea, no matter what it is, we should follow it and take a look. Sir God Qianlong and the two other people started to move immediately. They followed the direction where the flittering light was shot to and headed over quickly. If the flittering light had maintained its frightening speed, with just the three of them, they would definitely be unable to catch up to it for their whole life. However, after the flittering light left the Buddhist Demon Sea, its speed began to decrease at once. In no time, the flittering light came to a complete stop at a piece of void. After the flittering light dissipated, a shadow appeared. This shadow was Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang had just stopped moving, and he immediately groaned, "Ugh!" Then he spat a mouthful of blood. He had forcefully performed the second seal of 9 province seal, hacked the earth earlier, and it was overloading his body, so his divine body was damaged. Then, the ancient flood dragon attacked him with chilliness to the point where his organs turned bad and his divine body was heavily injured. Then, he was thrown out by One-Star Man. Although he did that to save him and let him leave the battlefield, the power he had used was terrifying. During the process, his injury went from bad to worse. By then, he was in a miserable situation. Jian Wushuang resisted the sharp pain from his body as he looked around. After he looked around, his eyes dilated in shock. This is outside of Buddhist Demon Sea. Jian Wushuang found it unbelievable. One should know that the triangle island that had sunk and disappeared which he was on, although it wasn't the inland sea of Buddhist Demon Sea, was quite deep in the open sea. With Jian Wushuang's travel speed, from the triangle island to the outside of Buddhist Demon Sea, he would at least require 1 to 2 years' time. But then it was just one throw. The power of one throw threw him out of the battlefield and out of Buddhist Demon Sea directly. What kind of power was that? Which level of technique did he perform? One-Star Man. Jian Wushuang remembered the name clearly. He knew that the reason why he could escape by the skin of his teeth was because of the assistance from One-Star Man. Otherwise, he would have been eaten by the ancient flood dragon long ago. I wonder who the senior is. Judging from his looks, he seems to be related to 7-Star Black Sect and the person that was fighting with him. He might be an enemy of 7-Star Black Sect. Jian Wushuang muttered. Regardless, this favor has been engraved in my mind. One-Star Man had saved him, and he had even given him an opportunity. The palm that he performed sealed in Jian Wushuang's brain. The palm would provide Jian Wushuang with immeasurable help. Jian Wushuang was still in deep thought, but suddenly, there were 3 flowing lights traveling over from the void afar. Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. When he saw the 3 figures clearly, there was a chilly gleam in his eyes. Among the 3 persons, Jian Wushuang knew 2 of them. Sir God Qianlong and real God Han Quan, the 2 experts from Soaring Heaven King Palace. Both of them had had conflicts with him in the 8th layer in the past. Jian Wushuang had gained fame by stepping on the 2 experts' shoulders. Then, outside of Buddhist Demon Sea, both parties had crossed paths again. Enemies on a narrow road. Jian Wushuang looked cold. The three figures hailed and looked at Jian Wushuang, who was floating quietly in the air. Sir God Qianlan and real God Han Quan quivered at the sight. Jian Wushuang. Sir God Qianlan clenched his fists. It's him. Real God Han Quan revealed a terrified expression. In the battle in the 8th lair back then, Jian Wushuang had injured Sir God Qianlan badly and captured real God Han Quan. In the end, Soaring Heaven King Palace had paid a great price in exchange for him. Sir God Qianlan was angry with Jian Wushuang, while real God Han Quan was fearful of him. Although real God Han Quan was also a real god and an expert in the first few places on real god ranking list, he had no courage to fight Jian Wushuang. The flowing light that burst out from Buddhist demon sea earlier, could it be him? Sir God Qianlan muttered. Sir God Qianlan, let's go. Real God Han Quan said fearfully. Sir God Qianlan nodded faintly. He had fought with Jian Wushuang before and he had suffered a great loss. If there wasn't any reason, he naturally didn't intend to fight with Jian Wushuang again. But just as the two of them turned to leave, hold on. Real God Yun at the side, who had never spoken earlier, called them. Sir God Qianlan, real God Han Quan, didn't the two of you realize that Jian Wushuang's aura seems to be very weak? Real God Yun said. Weak aura. Sir God Qianlan and real God Han Quan looked at Jian Wushuang carefully. The two of them looked and they were surprised. It was true. Jian Wushuang then, his aura was weak. To be exact, his aura was extremely weak. They could even feel that Jian Wushuang's aura might possibly vanish anytime. What happened? Sir God Qianlan creased his eyebrows. He just came out of Buddhist Demon Sea. Did he run into any danger in Buddhist Demon Sea and get severely injured? Very likely. Real God Yun nodded and smiled. When he came out of Buddhist Demon Sea earlier, he didn't fly out on his own but in an uncontrollable condition. It was as though he was thrown out. If I'm not mistaken, he definitely ran into some kind of trouble in Buddhist Demon Sea and got severely injured. As for his power, it definitely decreased tremendously. Sir God Qianlan, this is a chance hard to come by for us. Sir God Qianlan's face grew cold when he heard that. The feud between Jian Wushuang and Soaring Heaven King Palace was deep-rooted. Jian Wushuang had made Soaring Heaven King Palace suffer a great loss and they had even become a laughingstock once. Such deep-seated grudge, Soaring Heaven King Palace naturally wasn't willing to let it slip. But because Jian Wushuang was extremely powerful and he had Lineage of Star as his backer, it wasn't easy to kill him. But then, they were in the 6th lair. There was no one from Lineage of Star who could come to the rescue, and Jian Wushuang was severely injured. This chance was truly hard to come by. Such a great opportunity, we shouldn't miss it. Sir God Qianlan clasped his hands together, and there was light shimmering in his eyes. Han Quan, Yun, the two of you retreat to a place far away. Don't let Jian Wushuang get any chance to catch the two of you. Yes. Real God Han Quan and Real God Yun nodded. With the previous lesson of Real God Han Quan's experience, the two real gods naturally retreated to somewhere far away as they were going to launch an attack. As the two real gods retreated, Sir God Qianlan walked towards Jian Wushuang slowly. Jian Wushuang, how do you do? Sir God Qianlan flashed a malicious smile. I see. It's Sir God Qianlan from Soaring Heaven King Palace. We just fought not too long ago. I never thought we were going to see each other so soon. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly, and he looked like he couldn't be bothered. Why? Your previous injury recovered so quickly. Humph. Sir God Qianlan humped coldly. He had been severely injured by Jian Wushuang as he had been careless and it had established Jian Wushuang's name. To him, it was a humiliation. I was careless last time. As we have met again today, I'd like to regain my name. Sir God Qianlan's voice was bright and clear. He flipped his wrist and a red rod appeared in his hand while a fierce aura soared from Sir God Qianlan's body. Want to fight? Jian Wushuang smirked and waved his hand. Then, 2 rays of golden light suddenly lit up. Whoosh! Whoosh! 2 rays of brilliant golden light stopped beside Jian Wushuang, and they were the 2 Hongjun golden swords. The 2 Hongjun golden swords were emitting an infinite amount of cold light and it looked as if they could attack any time. If you wish to fight with me, You had better be prepared to die. Jian Wushuang was filled with a great amount of murderous intent. Upon seeing the two Hongjun golden swords, the corners of Sir God Qianlan's mouth became distorted. Back then, in the 8th lair, Jian Wushuang had used one Hongjun golden sword to suppress him. At present, there were two of them. This Jian Wushuang. Could it be that he was not injured at all? Sir God Qianlan started to hesitate. However, his expression changed abruptly. No, that's wrong. If he was not injured, he would definitely not say any unnecessary things to me. Instead, he would control the two Hongjun swords to kill me right away. Even though he did not do it straight away, he still took out the two golden swords. Hence, is he making an empty show of strength in order to intimidate me? After Sir God Qianlan thought to himself and understood what was going on, an enormous amount of flames of fury appeared in his eyes. He was almost intimidated by Jian Wushuang for real. Little kid, die! Sir God Qianlan gave a furious roar, and the crimson rod in his hands swept past the area abruptly. Countless crimson waves appeared in the void at once. They then swept past the area and gathered to form a gigantic crimson rod shadow that was hundreds of feet wide instantly. The crimson red shadow was extremely huge, and it attacked Jian Wushuang immediately. Oh no! Jian Wushuang's expression changed at once. Sir God Qianlan's guess was right. He was indeed making an empty show of strength, and his objective was to get the people in front of him to retreat in the face of difficulty. As for fighting for real, his injuries were really too serious, and he probably could not even unleash 10% of his abilities. Moreover, his divine power was almost completely depleted as well. In such a state, even a chaotic real god could serve as a threat to him, let alone Sir God Qianlan. Seeing the crimson rod shadow was heading toward him, Jian Wushuang used his full power at once and controlled one Hongjun golden sword to attack. The Hongjun golden sword unleashed an impressive amount of power and clashed with the rod shadow head-on with lightning speed. Bam! With a loud sound, the Hongjun golden sword moved at an even faster speed. As for Jian Wushuang, his body shook vigorously and he spit out 3 mouthfuls of blood in succession. His aura, which was already extremely weak to begin with, fell to rock bottom at that moment. Haha! Jian Wushuang, you are really making an empty show of strength. Upon seeing that, Sir God Qianlan laughed loudly and his eyes became filled with a vast amount of murderous intent. Damn it! Jian Wushuang gritted his teeth tightly. In the Buddhist Demon Sea, he had experienced 4 waves of attacks from the Acheron Palace successively, and he even fought a fight to the death with Emperor God Shuigu. Later on, he was attacked by the ancient flood dragon. And finally, he had escaped by the skin of his teeth. However, he totally did not expect himself to actually encounter the experts of the Soaring Heaven King Palace next. Sir God Qianlan was merely a normal Sir God. If Jian Wushuang were at his peak, he could kill him easily. However, at present, a man who had lost his position and influence was subjected to indignity. The assassination by the Acheron Palace as well as the Flood Dragon have been unable to kill me. Hence, how can I die in the hands of the Soaring Heaven King Palace? Jian Wushuang roared within his heart, and the remaining divine power in his body emerged again. Jian Wushuang, stop acting tough. Leave Sir God Qianlan to me and run away quickly. A deep voice echoed in Jian Wushuang's mind abruptly. At the same time, the skin on Jian Wushuang's body also started to wriggle madly. King of venomous worms? Jian Wushuang's heart became disturbed. Sir God Qianlan is a Sir God expert. Can you take care of him by yourself? With my current abilities, although I am not an opponent for Sir God Qianlan, I can still keep him busy for a period of time. During this period of time, you must run as far away as possible. As for me, there's no need for you to worry. The life force of a full-foot plenilune is so strong that it is beyond your expectations. Hence, a mere Sir God will be unable to kill me. As soon as his words left his mouth, countless tentacles came out of Jian Wushuang's body. The king of venomous worms' huge body also appeared in the void again. Rustle! The countless tentacles were like flittering lights, and they headed toward Sir God Qianlan with lightning speed, stopping him in his tracks as a result. What the hell is this? Sir God Qianlan revealed a stunned expression. However, even more anger emerged from him. Piss off! Boom! With a loud sound, the huge crimson rod shadow destroyed hundreds of tentacles instantly. Some of its power also spread to the King of Venomous Worms' body, causing the King of Venomous Worms to groan. However, at the next moment, even more tentacles attacked madly. King of Venomous Worms, I shall leave this to you. Jian Wushuang looked at the King of Venomous Worms deeply, and his eyes glowed with a shrill light. Soaring Heaven King Palace. I, Jian Wushuang, shall remember the debt today. In the future, if I don't eliminate the Soaring Heaven King Palace, my name, Jian Wushuang, will be written in reverse order. Just wait and see. Jian Wushuang's ice-cold voice resounded across the universe. He had already made use of his remaining divine power to escape quickly. Seeing that Jian Wushuang was running away, Sir God Qianlan as well as Real God Han Quan and Real God Ing Yun, who were both behind him, wanted to give chase. However, they were stopped by the King of Venomous Worms. Damn it! Where did this worm beast come from? Since you wish to die, I shall grant you your wish. Murderous intent sprang up in Sir God Qianlan. The power of his crimson rod then rose greatly, and many rod shadows attacked the King of Venomous Worms crazily. After undergoing a transformation, the King of Venomous Worms had awakened his close-quarters combat abilities. Moreover, it was a full-foot plenilune. Hence, it could just about serve as a threat to a normal almighty. However, after the successive great battles in the Buddhist Demon Sea, the King of Venomous Worms did not get off with light injuries either. At present, his abilities had not recovered to their peak. Furthermore, he was fighting with Sir God Qianlan alone. Therefore, he would definitely be in a huge disadvantage. However, as his body was enormous and that his life force was exuberant, he only started to escape after fighting with Sir God Qianlan for close to a quarter of an hour's time. Sir God Qianlan had also given chase for a long time. However, he still allowed the King of Venomous Worms to get away in the end. At a dark void in the 6th layer, Sir God Qianlan, Real God Han Quan, and Sir God Ing Yun were gathered together. In addition, they had ugly expressions. We have actually missed this golden opportunity. Sir God Qianlan clenched both his fists tightly, and he was filled with dissatisfaction. It's all thanks to that worm beast from before. If not for it obstructing us, Jian Wushuang would definitely have died. Real God Han Quan snorted coldly. The worm beast from before was very frightening. Real God Ing Yun said with a low voice. It was very frightening. Moreover, it was not just frightening in terms of its close-quarters combat abilities. Most importantly, it had a frightening life force and ability to recover. With such a suppression by Sir God Qianlan where he injured the worm beast continuously, he still had not managed to kill the worm beast. Instead, he could only look on as it escaped in the end. That worm beast merely has a powerful life force. However, this is not important. The most important thing is Jian Wushuang. Sir God Qianlan squinted his eyes. This time around, we attacked him when he was seriously injured. If we had managed to kill him, then there would be no problem. However, since he's not dead, the Soaring Heaven King Palace will have endless trouble in the future. In the dark void at the border of Buddhist Demon Sea, Jian Wushuang, who was fleeing, finally stopped on a dark ground. I can't continue to run anymore. Jian Wushuang looked around himself. It's because I am at the border of Buddhist Demon Sea. It would be difficult to run into any star demon. But if I were to continue to run forward, there's an 80% chance that I will run into one. Star demons in the 6th layer. Besides the 4-horned star demons that were extremely rare and only lived in the dangerous place, almost nothing else could pose a threat to Jian Wushuang. However, it was when Jian Wushuang was at his zenith. To Jian Wushuang, then, even a crimson 3-horned star demon was vital. He didn't dare to move around in the 6th layer then. It was most crucial for him to quickly recover his situation. My injury is too serious and my power has reached an all-time low. It will be impossible for me to recover in a short period of time. Plus, the 6th layer isn't a place to recover. Jian Wushuang muttered and immediately took out a token to send a message to Hall Master Yang. Jian Wushuang, Palace Master, has already arrived in the 6th lair. I will send your location to him. He will be with you in no time. Besides, Hall Master Gu Xian has already escaped from Buddhist Demon Sea. Hall Master Yuan replied. Palace Master came? Jian Wushuang stunned. From what he knew, the Master of Star Palace had always been meditating in seclusion. Plus, the meditation then seemed to be extremely important. Hence, even when Jian Wushuang had become a hall master and threw a banquet, the Master of Star Palace never appeared. But then, Palace Master was already liberated from seclusion. The moment he found out that you were assassinated in Buddhist Demon Sea, he immediately rushed over. Hall Master Yuan said. I see. Jian Wushuang was touched. Jian Wushuang, just wait for a moment. Hall Master Yuan said. Jian Wushuang nodded and immediately sat down. He flipped his hand and there were a bunch of elixirs in his hand. The elixirs were extremely precious. Even a Sir God would value them highly. However, Jian Wushuang ate all the elixirs as though he was eating beans. He took in more than 10 of them in one go. Then, he continued to treat his injury as he waited. Very soon, a maroon figure got closer to Jian Wushuang. The maroon figure belonged to King of Venomous Worms. He was connected to Jian Wushuang by heart and blood. They could feel the existence of one another. Then, King of Venomous Worms immediately snuck into Jian Wushuang's body. King of Venomous Worms, are you okay? Jian Wushuang asked. I got injured and I need some time to recover, but it's nothing major, King of Venomous Worms said. Jian Wushuang let out a breath of relief when he heard the news. The time flew past. Jian Wushuang waited for 10 days in silence. Then, the Master of Star Palace and Hall Master Gu Xian arrived. When Jian Wushuang saw the Master of Star Palace and Hall Master Gu Xian, he was finally at ease. Jian Wushuang, your injury. The Master of Star Palace squinted his eyes. He could feel that Jian Wushuang's aura was extremely weak. I am badly injured, but I am alive. Jian Wushuang smiled weakly. What happened in Buddhist Demon Sea? Where's Lei Chao? Hall Master Gu Xian asked. Let's talk about this when we return, Jian Wushuang said. The Master of Star Palace nodded faintly. Then, the 3 of them returned to Lineage of Star. Although Jian Wushuang was badly injured, he consumed some elixirs and recovered some divine power during the 10 days when he was waiting for the Master of Star Palace and Hall Master Gu Xian. He could afford to simply fly. With the Master of Star Palace escorting personally, the journey back was smooth. The 3 of them arrived in Lineage of Star very soon. In the lair of Lineage of Star, in a lofty palace. The Master of Star Palace was seated on the uppermost of the palace while Jian Wushuang, Hall Master Yuan and Hall Master Gu Xian sat on their respective seats. As for Hall Master Nyayun, he remained in the 5th lair and never came out. In the lofty palace then, it was dead silent. The 4 experts looked at the dead body in the middle of the hall and their faces looked icy. The dead body was naturally Lei Chao's. Lei Chao, I killed him myself. Jian Wushuang's voice was deep and there was pain in his eyes. The 3 of them heard him but never intended to reprimand Jian Wushuang. I also know about soul control technique. Once a person is soul controlled, they don't stand a chance to shake it off. It basically means the person is dead. With you killing him, it is simply giving him a true relief. If I were you, I would have done the same, the Master of Star Palace said. Hall Master Yuan and Hall Master Gu Xian nodded solemnly. Lei Chao was an expert of Lineage of Star. Before Jian Wushuang rose up, he was the number 1 among real gods in Lineage of Star. They shared a great relationship. Lei Chao had died and they were all in pain. However, if they were Jian Wushuang, they definitely would do that same as Jian Wushuang to give Lei Chao relief. Bury him. To outsiders, tell them that he ran into danger and accidentally fallen when he wandered in the 6th lair. The Master of Star Palace said. Yes. Hall Master Yuan nodded, and he waved to keep Lei Chao's body into Chen Kuan Ring. Everyone reigned in their agony and the Master of Star Palace looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, tell us what happened in Buddhist Demon Sea. The Master of Star Palace said. Jian Wushuang nodded. Then he started telling the ins and outs of the story. He didn't hide anything about his experience in Buddhist Demon Sea. He talked about everything that he should. From the beginning when he had first arrived at the Triangle Island where Lei Chao was, to the first killer move he encountered, which was the assassination carried out by the ugly-looking lady. He also shared his judgment. When they heard of the first and second killer moves that Akron Palace had prepared, the three of them still remained calm. However, the moment they found out about Akron Palace's third move, Hall Master Yuan and Hall Master Gu Xian stood on their feet. The 5 powerful Sir Gods teamed up and set up the killing formation of 9 cuts. Hall Master Yuan and Hall Master Gu Xian's eyes were wide. They knew about the killing formation of 9 cuts too, and it was set up by 5 Sir Gods. Under normal circumstances, anyone lower than an Emperor God stood almost no chance to stay alive. However, Jian Wushuang had forcefully dissolved the killing formation of 9 cuts and killed one of them. Such power. Even the top Sir God wouldn't be able to do that. After I broke the killing formation of 9 cuts and killed Lei Chao, I met another person. The person was the 4th killer move that Akron Palace prepared for me. Jian Wushuang continued. He was in a crimson robe and he was using a crimson trident. He was already in the realm of Emperor God. Emperor God? Then even the master of Star Palace looked shocked. An Emperor God using a crimson trident? It's Emperor God Shui Gu. The master of Star Palace pounded the table and stood up in anger. There was murderous intention in his eyes. As for Hall Master Yuan and Hall Master Gu Xian, they were terrified and they were also raging with anger. Emperor God Shui Gu was a famous and great expert in the eternal chaotic world. In the past, the Sanctuary Alliance had always thought that Emperor God Shui Gu had a weird personality, and he was unwilling to be constrained by the Sanctuary Alliance. However, it was only at that moment that they knew that Emperor God Shui Gu was actually someone from the Akron Palace. As for the Akron Palace, in order to get rid of Jian Wushuang, a real god, not only did they employ 5 Sir Gods to deploy the killing formation of 9 cuts, they also employed Emperor God Shui Gu to take action personally. They were really ruthless. As for later on, Jian Wushuang also gave a simple explanation regarding what he experienced later on. Of course, he had merely talked about some of his own trump cards briefly. Upon hearing that Jian Wushuang had had an intense battle with Emperor God Shui Gu, and that he also did his best to keep himself alive, Hall Master Yuan and Hall Master Gu Xian could not help but admire him. When he reached the end where the ancient flood dragon appeared, swallowed Emperor God Shui Gu with one gulp, killed the 4 Sir Gods and attracted 2 extremely powerful experts to fight a great battle in the Buddhist Demon Sea, Hall Master Yuan, Hall Master Gu Xian and even the Star Palace Master were stunned. That legend is actually real? The Star Palace Master murmured. That legend. Jian Wushuang could not help but look at the Star Palace Master. A long time ago, there was a rumor in the eternal chaotic world. It is said that when the ancient past and the first era crumbled, countless experts died during the great battle. However, at the same time, there was a portion of experts who did not die in the great battle. Instead, they entered a state of eternal deep sleep. As for the places that they are in deep sleep in, some of them are in the forbidden areas of the First Era's battlefield, while some of them are in the ancient battlefield. These experts who are in deep sleep possessed exceptionally powerful techniques, and even great emperors are afraid of them. For example, the boundless purgatory in the second layer, which is known for its mighty name, is said to be a place of deep sleep of an extremely powerful expert. The Star Palace Master said earnestly. Boundless purgatory? Hall Master Gu Xian's throat could not remain calm. Going to the second layer was the same as going to one's death if he were to travel there without the fighting capabilities of an emperor god. For the boundless purgatory, Hall Master Gu Xian had only heard of it before. As for Jian Wushuang, he could remain calm. After all, back then in the 8th layer, he had also come across an expert who was in deep sleep. He knew very well that the eternal chaotic world was not as simple as it looked on the surface. Jian Wushuang, according to what you have said, it seems like there are 2 experts in deep sleep in the Buddhist Demon Sea. However, due to the clash between you and the Akron Palace, those 2 experts were awakened by chance, and this resulted in the great battle which occurred later on. The Star Palace Master said. Among the two experts, one of them said that I am definitely connected to a sect known as the Seven-Star Black Sect. Thus, he took action and saved my life by sending me out of the Buddhist demon sea, Jian Wushuang said. Seven-Star Black Sect? Hall Master Gu Xian was stunned, as she had never heard of such a sect before. I know about the Seven-Star Black Sect. The Star Palace Master opened his mouth and said, the Seven-Star Black Sect is a powerful sect back in the ancient past. However, as the ancient past collapsed, this sect naturally disappeared along with their long history. As for him saying that you are related to the Seven-Star Black Sect, it is considered normal, because the secret skill of Star Palace that you have cultivated have come from the Seven-Star Black Sect. As I was fortunate, I happened to chance upon this secret skill's inheritance. What? Hall Master Gu Xian was stunned. However, she understood immediately. The secret skill of Star Palace was frightening, extremely frightening. Due to the existence of the secret skill of Star Palace in the lineage of Star, many powerhouses were afraid of the lineage of Star. As for such a kind of secret skill under normal circumstances, even great emperor-level experts would be unable to create it. Thus, Hall Master Gu Xian had suspected whether this secret skill was created by the Star Palace Master a long time ago. However, the Star Palace Master had never spoken about it before. At present, the Star Palace Master had taken the initiative to admit it. This is what has happened. After listening to Jian Wushuang, Hall Master Yuan, Hall Master Gu Xian and the Star Palace Master gasped. They knew very clearly how dangerous Jian Wushuang's experience this time around was. At the same time, they had become even more fearful of the Acheron Palace. Jian Wushuang, for you to be able to escape by the skin of your teeth this time around, apart from the fact that it was due to your powerful abilities, it was also partially due to luck. As such, you must absolutely be careful in the future. The Star Palace Master warned. Understood. Jian Wushuang nodded his head earnestly. One would only learn from their own mistakes. With the narrow escape this time around, Jian Wushuang had a better understanding of the Acheron Palace and he revered the world even more. Thus, he would naturally be more careful in doing things in the future. After all, he absolutely did not want to experience the same thing twice. All right, since your injuries are very serious, you had better go back and recuperate first, the Star Palace Master said. Understood. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. As his injuries were very serious, he would be unable to recover in a short amount of time. Hence, he had already made up his mind to stay in the lineage of Star for a while to seclude himself in recovery. In a secret room that was covered heavily by seals in the Sword Star, Jian Wushuang was sitting down with his legs crossed. Jian Wushuang, this time around, you survived the assassination that was planned carefully by the Acheron Palace. Moreover, you caused the Acheron Palace to suffer great losses. If this piece of news were to spread, it would definitely cause an uproar in the eternal chaotic world and your reputation will improve greatly. The King of Venomous Worms' voice echoed in Jian Wushuang's mind. I was just lucky. Jian Wushuang laughed indifferently, and he was not arrogant in the slightest. He knew very clearly that luck had made up a huge portion of the reason why he was able to stay alive. Looking at the methods that the Acheron Palace had employed, even Jian Wushuang himself could not help but gasp in admiration. The Acheron Palace would not take action easily. However, when they took action, it was indeed extraordinary and it forced Jian Wushuang into a hopeless situation right away. If not for him being fortunate and coming across the expert deep inside the Buddhist demon sea, he would definitely be dead. Forget about the Acheron Palace. However, after that, I was hunted down by Sir God Qianlong of the Soaring Heaven King Palace. That is the true humiliation. Jian Wushuang clenched both his fists tightly, and a vast amount of murderous intent emerged in his eyes. The Acheron Palace had hatched a detailed plan to kill him, and the methods that they had employed had caused even Jian Wushuang to exclaim in admiration. Even if he were killed by them, he would not feel any grievances. But what about the Soaring Heaven King Palace? They had attacked him when he was seriously injured. This caused Jian Wushuang to be even more furious. If not for the King of Venomous Worms taking action and stopping Sir God Qianlong, he would have probably died at the hands of Sir God Qianlong. That was a true oppression, and he would have died an unworthy death. Soaring Heaven King Palace. Jian Wushuang was overflowing with murderous intent. There's no rush. When my abilities recover completely, I shall take my time to play with them. However, Jian Wushuang also knew that his injuries this time around were too serious. Hence, it would be impossible for him to recover his abilities completely in a short amount of time. Moreover, if it were only injuries in his body, it would be all right. However, the most important thing was that he had paid a huge price to fight a fight to the death this time around. In particular, all his 6 ancient god stars were destroyed. His ancient god's cultivation base had fallen to rock bottom, and the process for him to recover would not be easy. I shall do it slowly. During this period of time where I have secluded myself in recuperation to recover my abilities, I can also absorb all the demon cores that I obtained back then and go for stage 3 ultimate real god. In addition, there is also the palm that the 1-star man left behind in my head. That is also a great opportunity. In terms of ultimate divine power, after Jian Wushuang had consumed 9 Taiqing ancient panaceas, the ultimate divine power in him was already extremely close to completion. There was only a very small part of divine power left. From Jian Wushuang's viewpoint, he only needed to absorb all the demon cores that he got from Soaring Heaven King Palace, and it should be sufficient. By then, when his divine power had reached completion, he would be able to achieve the 3rd stage of ultimate real god, and his power would increase tremendously. Then, he needed to rest in seclusion to recover from his injury. Besides, he needed to precipitate the 6 ancient god stars again, which would definitely require an extremely long time. During the process, he could absorb the demon cores to increase his divine power. Let's begin. Jian Wushuang let out a breath and started to meditate. Just as Jian Wushuang was resting in seclusion, in an extremely far-away territory, on a large dark land, a cold, dark palace towered. In the palace, a man in a black robe knelt politely. There were many statue-like soldiers in black armor that gave out cold auras around themselves. Jian Wushuang has already returned to Lineage of Star? An ancient yet hoarse voice suddenly rang in the palace, and the voice sounded like it was coming from all directions. Yes, someone saw that he entered Lineage of Star with the Master of Star Palace, with the Master of Star Palace escorting him personally. The man in a black robe said politely, "Humph!" A cold humph suddenly spread. Roar! 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 The soldiers in black armor in the palace let out angry roars simultaneously, and their voices shook the earth. Such a meticulous plan that was said to be well-conceived didn't kill Jian Wushuang? What do I need all of you for? The hoarse voice spread with boundless pressure. The man in a black robe who knelt down couldn't help but shiver. How about Xuegu? Emoing? Where are the few of them? A hoarse voice asked. Master, besides when Jian Wushuang first fell into the trap and Emperor God Xuegu sent a message, there was no other news from them. I continuously tried to get into contact with them, but there was no reply until now. The man in black robe replied. The lofty palace was suddenly in silence. Although Buddhist Demon Sea was dangerous, time and space wasn't sealed off. Hence, they could still communicate with one another. But then, Jian Wushuang had already returned to Lineage of Star, and the people from Akron Palace didn't reply. There was only one possibility. Dead. Xuegu, Emoing, and the men that we've sent out have all died. The hoarse voice continued to speak, but there wasn't anger like before. Who is it? Who could kill them? Jian Wushuang. Impossible. No matter how ridiculously strong Jian Wushuang is, he is only a real god. His power is at most comparable to real god Wu Bei's. The 5 Sir Gods from Akron Palace and even Emperor God Xuegu himself. Jian Wushuang didn't even stand much hope to stay alive, let alone killing Xuegu, Emoing, and the others. He definitely does not have the capability. If it wasn't him, who would it be? The Master of Star Palace. The owner of the hoarse voice reckoned that only the Master of Star Palace in Lineage of Star had the power to kill Emperor God Xuegu and the 5 other Sir Gods. Master, according to our information, the Master of Star Palace had been meditating in seclusion. Before Jian Wushuang was assassinated, he never left to the 6th lair. It was impossible that he could reach it in time to save Jian Wushuang. The man in a black robe who knelt down replied politely, If it wasn't the master of Star Palace, who would it be? Would it be any experts of Sanctuary Alliance who happen to be wandering in Buddhist Demon Sea? No way, I roughly know the locations of the top experts of Sanctuary Alliance. There wasn't anyone in the 6th layer. If it wasn't the experts of Sanctuary Alliance, the thing that caused their deaths would only be the natural danger in Buddhist Demon Sea, or maybe some ancient existence in the depth of Buddhist Demon Sea got involved. But why would the ancient existence suddenly be awakened? The owner of the hoarse voice muttered. Then he let out a sigh after a long while. Forget it. As the mission has failed, it is useless to look into it. Send down my command. Remove Jian Wushuang from the must-kill name list. Remove Jian Wushuang from the must-kill name list? The man in a black robe who knelt was stunned. Master, will we not assassinate him in the future? 5 Sir Gods teamed up and set up the killing formation of 9 cuts, plus an Emperor God who was extremely close to the top who performed and carried out a meticulously planned assassination. In the end, they hadn't killed him, but the whole army was wiped out. Regardless of the reason, it proved Jian Wushuang's power. If we were to want to kill him again, we will have to at least send out the top of the top who is comparable to the Master of Star Palace, or even an Emperor God stronger than him. And even so, it will not be definite. After all, there was an assassination. Jian Wushuang will definitely be more cautious. To be able to kill him, there is only one way, which is for the great Emperor himself to kill him personally. However, there are only 2 experts who are great Emperor level in Acheron Palace, and their identities are extremely unique. They definitely won't take action to assassinate a genius of Sanctuary Alliance. In other words, we, Acheron Palace, have already missed the best timing to kill Jian Wushuang. In the future, unless there is to be a fight against Sanctuary Alliance or a good opportunity, we shouldn't try to assassinate him. The hoarse voice reverberated in the lofty palace. It didn't go away for a very long time. Leave. Yes. The man in the black robe immediately left. In the lofty palace, the remaining cold soldiers in black armor continued to stand there like statues. But suddenly, there was a creepy shadow that appeared on the uppermost throne from nowhere. The person was in a white robe and his face was blurry. Jian Wushuang. A faint voice was heard from the blurry shadow in a white robe. You are extremely talented. Far more talented than real God Wu Bei. You could totally become an almighty in the future and stand shoulder to shoulder with a great emperor. You might even stand a chance to reach the level of the strongest person in Sanctuary Alliance. If it was like before, we of Acheron Palace would definitely kill a top genius like you, regardless of the price we would have to pay. But now we can't. You should be glad that you were born in a great period. We of Acheron Palace have something more important to be done at this period. We have no time, nor money, nor energy to spare to take care of you. However, the period will pass. In no time, the period will pass. In 100,000 years at most. Jian Wushuang, you have 100,000 years to grow. 100,000 years later, we of Acheron Palace will go all out. By then, even if you become great emperor, you'll die, without a doubt. Ha ha ha. The blurry shadow in a white robe let out a burst of strange laughter. It didn't go away for a very long time in the lofty palace. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang had already been in seclusion for 500 years. In a secret room in the Sword Star. King of venomous worms, your speed of recovery is really slow. Even though it has already been 500 years, you have still not precipitated a single ancient god star. Jian Wushuang complained. It will be soon. At most, it will take another 100 years for the first ancient god star to be restored. The king of venomous worms' voice echoed in Jian Wushuang's mind. Jian Wushuang, you should be content with your current situation. Do you think that it is so easy to restore the ancient god stars? Fortunately, I have already transformed into a full-foot plenilune and my speed of recovery is many times faster than before. If not, under normal circumstances, when all 6 ancient god stars of a 6-star royal ancient god are destroyed, even with a plenilune helping you to recover with its full power, it would at least take tens of thousands of years for you to recover to your peak. Tens of thousands of years? Jian Wushuang clicked his tongue in admiration. He had heard from the king of venomous worms a long time ago that the cost of using the star destruction skill was extremely high for ancient gods. If not for them giving their all, the ancient gods would absolutely not use it easily. Moreover, even if they were to use it under normal circumstances, they would only destroy 1 or 2 stars. Only lunatics would destroy 6 stars in one go. It was only because of the fact that Jian Wushuang was forced into a situation where he had no choice but to destroy 6 stars in one go. King of venomous worms, with your speed, how long will it take to restore all 6 stars? Jian Wushuang could not help but ask. It will not take long. It will probably take about 7 to 8,000 years of time for me to restore them. Jian Wushuang, do you think that you have the right to complain? These 6 stars do not require you to precipitate them slowly. Instead, it is purely dependent on me working desperately hard to restore them. Even with this, are you still not satisfied? The king of venomous worms said with dissatisfaction. Jian Wushuang could not help but laugh. Plenilunions were born together with an ancient god. To ancient gods, plenilunions were extremely important. They did not merely help in terms of recovering divine power and injuries. Moreover, even the destroyed ancient god stars were dependent on the plenilunions to restore them. If the ancient gods were to rely on themselves to restore the ancient god stars, it would not be as simple as tens of thousands of years. Instead, it might even take hundreds of thousands of years. As for the 500 years that Jian Wushuang had been in seclusion, it was the king of venomous worms who had done his best to help him restore the destroyed ancient god star. As for Jian Wushuang, he had placed most of his attention in that one shocking palm in his head. That palm was the opportunity that the super-expert one-star man had bestowed upon him in the Buddhist demon sea. Extermination palm of reincarnation. This palm contained an infinite amount of reincarnation power. To Jian Wushuang, this palm was so profound that it was impressive. During the past 500 years, he had been doing his utmost best to comprehend the palm. However, he had only managed to scratch its surface. However, even though he had only scratched the surface, he was still over the moon. Extermination palm of reincarnation. This palm seemed to contain the whole reincarnation doctrine, Jian Wushuang murmured. He then closed his eyes again and the shocking palm appeared in his head again. Jian Wushuang also continued to comprehend. As he comprehended, he absorbed the pure power that the demon cores contained at the same time. Hence, he lost no time in doing both things at the same time. After all, it was very easy to absorb the demon cores as he only needed to leave a small bit of his consciousness outside. Time passed by slowly. In a flash, another 1,500 years passed. In the secret room, Jian Wushuang had closed his eyes and he was sitting down with his legs crossed. However, from his right palm, a vast amount of reincarnation power had emerged. Jian Wushuang's level of comprehension of the reincarnation doctrine had already achieved the top of the 6th level of the Doctrine Palace. Hence, he could control a great amount of reincarnation power. At that moment, Jian Wushuang swung his right hand, which contained a vast amount of reincarnation power, toward the void in front of him. He had unleashed this movement according to the way of using the shocking palm in his head. After comprehending with great effort for 2,000 years, although he was unable to fully comprehend the real secrets within the palm, he could already just about use the move itself. Every time that he swung his palm, Jian Wushuang did not use his divine power. Many palm prints that contained reincarnation power were unleashed and it would shake the void every time it was unleashed. Jian Wushuang was practicing repeatedly. During this period of time, it was unknown how many times he had repeated the same movement. However, all of a sudden, buzz! A palm print materialized completely at the void in front of Jian Wushuang and it was sent out with a great amount of power. Rustle. Although it did not contain any divine power, the palm still created many ripples in the void, and it almost broke open the void completely. Jian Wushuang's eyes, which had been closed tightly, finally opened and a delighted expression emerged from his eyes. There's finally something. Jian Wushuang was over the moon. Over the past 2,000 years, he had been studying and comprehending the shocking palm in his head intensively. All he wanted to do was to grasp how to use the palm for real. However, after practicing many times and studying intensively for a long period of time, he was still unable to bring forth the hidden secrets in the palm in the end. Hence, he was totally unable to do it the same way as the palm, where he would combine a great amount of reincarnation power perfectly and unleash a frightening amount of power. Against that, Jian Wushuang could not do anything. He knew that it was almost impossible for him to learn how to use the palm. At the very least, it was impossible for him at that moment. Hence, he could only mimic it. He would mimic the palm to the best of his abilities. He would mimic the way it was used and also mimic some special secrets that the palm contained. After studying intensively for hundreds of years and practicing for countless times, he had finally managed to imitate it with some difficulty. As soon as he imitated it successfully, Jian Wushuang realized that the conditions were ripe and his comprehension of the reincarnation doctrine achieved a whole new level. Putting it another way, he had opened up a new door. The 7th level of the Doctrine Palace. Jian Wushuang's eyes were glowing brilliantly. He could feel that the amount of reincarnation power that he could control had risen like never before. Such a kind of improvement was a transformation in terms of quality, and it was completely different from before. For him to have such a change meant that his comprehension of the reincarnation doctrine had made a breakthrough. He had reached the 7th level of the Doctrine Palace from his original level of being at the top of the 6th level of the Doctrine Palace. Although it seemed to be only one step between these two levels, the gap between them was like heaven and earth. It must be known that even if one were extremely talented in comprehension, the 6th level of the Doctrine Palace was still at the level of a real god. As for the 7th level of the Doctrine Palace, it was the level of an almighty. My comprehension of the reincarnation doctrine and spacetime doctrine have both achieved the top of the 6th level already. Moreover, I am more proficient in comprehending the spacetime doctrine. Hence, I originally thought that even if I were to make a breakthrough in the future, my spacetime doctrine would definitely be the first one to make a breakthrough. However, I did not expect my reincarnation doctrine to actually make a breakthrough first. Jian Wushuang laughed. Since his reincarnation doctrine had made a breakthrough to achieve the 7th level of the Doctrine Palace, his abilities would skyrocket. At the very least, his attack power would achieve a new level. However, if his spacetime doctrine were to make a breakthrough, it would probably influence his abilities to a greater extent. No matter what, it's a good thing for me to have made a breakthrough. Moreover, I have barely managed to mimic that palm. Let me have a try. Jian Wushuang was excited and he raised his palm again. This time around, his palm did not only contain a vast amount of reincarnation power. Instead, it also contained a small bit of divine power. In a split second, he swung his palm. Hong! Then, the void before Jian Wushuang shattered like a piece of paper. He felt the power contained in his palm, and Jian Wushuang revealed a smile. I reckon that my palm could only give play to 1/100th of a one-star man, or maybe even 1/10,000th of his power. Even so, it is extremely powerful. Jian Wushuang was shocked. The degree of the scariness of the palm that the one-star man had left in his head was far beyond Jian Wushuang's imagination. Even if it was only 1/100th or 1/10,000th of the power, it was still considered an extremely powerful unique skill. My palm is also driven by the power of reincarnation. Its name will be Reincarnation Palm then, Jian Wushuang muttered. Just then, Jian Wushuang was stunned. This feeling. There was excitement in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Haha, in these 2,000 years, although I only absorbed some demon cores occasionally, the accumulated divine power is extremely vast. Now, I can finally precipitate the 100th drop of ultimate divine power droplet. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands and he could feel the changes in his body. In the ocean of divine power, there were originally 99 drops of ultimate divine power droplet floated there. But then, an enormous amount of divine power billowed and it started to precipitate the 100th drop of ultimate divine power droplet. The speed of precipitation was shocking. Jian Wushuang didn't need to do anything. Everything happened naturally. In a short while, the 100th ultimate divine power droplet was finally completed. It succeeded. Jian Wushuang was filled with excitement. The 100th ultimate divine power droplet marked the completion of divine power. Jian Wushuang had reached the limit of real God stage. The moment it was precipitated, Jian Wushuang immediately felt his divine power and divine body start to transform at a shocking speed. Such a transformation was much bigger compared to the transformation when he had leveled up to the second stage from the first stage of ultimate real God. His divine power was increasing madly in strength and quality. For instance, if Jian Wushuang's divine power strength before could merely shatter a 10,000 gene rock, he could easily break a tens of thousands of gene rock as his divine power grew stronger. A tens of thousands of gene rock, and his power continued to grow at a shocking speed. The same applied to his divine body. Jian Wushuang closed his eyes and fully focused on the transformation of his divine power and divine body. The time flew past and half a day passed. Jian Wushuang's transformation finally slowed down. At that very moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes shot open, and there was a burst of light. I'm finally at the third stage of ultimate real God. Jian Wushuang clenched his hand, and there was suddenly an explosive strength that burst out. In Jian Wushuang's perception, the terrifying explosion of divine power was at least 100 times stronger. One should know that his previous divine power explosion was already at Sir God level. This breakthrough brings about a drastic change in me, Jian Wushuang muttered. At the second stage of ultimate real God, divine power and divine body could be compared to an ordinary Sir God's. Once he reached the third stage of ultimate real God, his divine power and divine body was at the level of Emperor God. Sir God and Emperor God, both were almighties. It looked like it was just a different realm, but in actual fact, the difference was vast. When he was in Buddhist Demon Sea, Jian Wushuang had dealt with 5 Sir Gods, and they had even set up the killing formation of 9 cuts. But he had relied on his trump cards to break the killing formation of 9 cuts and killed one of them. After he met Emperor God Shui Gu. However, Emperor God Shui Gu alone had made Jian Wushuang go all out. He stopped at nothing. He had even performed the secret skill of Star Palace, but he couldn't match him evenly. That was the difference between Emperor God and Sir God. The difference was first displayed in divine power and divine body. The divine power and divine body of an Emperor God was 100 times stronger than an ordinary Sir God's. Secondly, an Emperor God's comprehension towards power of Heaven Wei definitely already reached the standard of the 8th level of Doctrine Palace. Sir God was merely on the 7th. The difference in the aspect was shockingly huge too. It led to the power of Emperor God that could suppress a Sir God like breaking a piece of dead wood. As for the difference between an Emperor God and a Great Emperor, it was even more ridiculous. Then, Jian Wushuang had reached the third stage of ultimate real God. At least in terms of divine power and divine body, he was already even-handed with an Emperor God. Merely relying on such ferocious divine power, he could wipe out all Sir Gods theoretically. Back then, real God Wu Bei was considered extremely strong among Sir God because he had reached the third stage of ultimate real God. It's a pity that his comprehension towards Heaven Wei was too low, Jian Wushuang said. Real God Wu Bei knew that his comprehension towards Heaven Wei wasn't high. He had only comprehended one power of Heaven Wei, and he had barely reached the standard of the 6th level in Doctrine Palace. He was very far away from the peak of the 6th level. Many real gods on Real God ranking list had a higher level of comprehension towards power of Heaven Wei than him. Hence, even though he had fierce divine power and a divine body, Real God Wu Bei could only suppress an ordinary Sir God. If he were to run into any top Sir Gods, he might not be the Sir God's match. However, Jian Wushuang was totally different. His comprehension of Heaven Wei was far higher than Real God Wu Bei's. His comprehension of Reincarnation doctrine itself already reached the 7th level in Doctrine Palace, which was on par with an almighty. Besides, he had many tricks and secret skills that Real God Wu Bei couldn't compare to favorably. Forget about the others. Merely the fact that he possessed the 4 Ancient God unique skill and 3 Ancient God secret skill was already sufficient for him to let out his fighting power flawlessly. With that, he was confident to wipe out any Sir Gods. In addition to that, there was the Hong Jun Golden Sword, Mountain River Map, secret skill of Star Palace, and other trump cards. Jian Wushuang was confident to fight a battle with an ordinary Emperor God. Even if he were to run into experts like Emperor God Shui Gu, he could match evenly even if he didn't go all out. My power has increased too greatly, Jian Wushuang smiled, but he quickly calmed down. I reached the third stage of Ultimate Real God, which is the peak of Ultimate Real God. Next, it will be the seventh step of inverse cultivation and to become an almighty. However, I haven't gotten the seventh step of inverse cultivation skill yet. Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. Inverse cultivation skills were very rarely seen. The first 5 steps were easy, but from the 6 steps onwards, it wasn't easily obtainable by any ordinary people. Jian Wushuang was lucky that he had run into the birth of real god Wu Bei's cave dwelling, and he had obtained the 6th step of inverse cultivation skill from him. As a result, he had reached the 3rd stage of ultimate real god. However, the 7th step after the 6th, the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill, even real god Wu Bei didn't get it back then. If Jian Wushuang wanted to become an almighty, he had to first obtain the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill. I remember that back then, real god Wu Bei has said before that he knew where the training method for the 7th step of an inverse cultivator was. However, it's a pity that that person is very reserved and old. Hence, real god Wu Bei did not even have a chance to interact with him. Jian Wushuang said, "For such a reserved expert, he must be someone who can shake the world, and the palace master should know about him. After coming out of seclusion, I will have to go and ask him." After thinking about that, Jian Wushuang calmed his mind down completely. After that, he continued to comprehend the shocking palm in his head. There is a unique method to use this palm, and it includes a method to use the reincarnation power as well. Although it's a palm skill, it can only be applied to sword principles. Jian Wushuang closed his eyes. No matter what shocking moves he possessed, he would never forget that he was a person who studied the sword. Sword principles were his root. For example, learning how to use the reincarnation palm by mimicking and studying the shocking palm was only for the sake of paving a way for him to study his sword principles. It was only by studying the palm in his head thoroughly that he could slowly develop it and create a sword principle that belonged to him. Jian Wushuang continued to comprehend, and the king of venomous worms also continued to restore his ancient god stars. It was extremely difficult to restore the ancient god stars, especially if all 6 stars were destroyed. Even with a full-foot plenilune like the king of venomous worms helping him to restore the ancient god stars with its full power, it would still require a very long time. Jian Wushuang had been prepared for it for a long time. Time passed by quickly. In a flash, Jian Wushuang had been in seclusion for a total of 7,800 years. In the secret room, Jian Wushuang was still sitting down with his legs crossed. In the space between his eyebrows, there were originally 5 ancient god stars. At present, the 6th dark golden ancient god star had started to precipitate slowly, and such a kind of precipitation carried on for more than half a month before the ancient god star had completely precipitated out. "It's finally done." The king of venomous worms' voice echoed in Jian Wushuang's head, and its voice was filled with fatigue. "King of venomous worms, thank you very much," Jian Wushuang said gratefully. He was grateful from the bottom of his heart. At the same time, he was also glad that he had a battle companion like the king of venomous worms who could fight side by side with him. Over the time the king of venomous worms lived inside his body, the king of venomous worms had given him a lot of help. Even though he already possessed the fighting capabilities of an almighty, and he was not considered weak among the almighties, the king of venomous worms was still able to help him considerably. Be it the intense battles in the Buddhist Demon Sea back then, or the experts of the Soaring Heaven King Palace who he helped to stop, the king of venomous worms had assisted him greatly. For example, for the past few years, the restoration of his ancient god stars and the recovery of the injuries in his body had all been dependent on the power of the king of venomous worms alone. If he did not have the king of venomous worms, he would have died many times. Moreover, the injuries in his body as well as the destroyed ancient god stars would also not have taken such a short period of time to recover. There is no need to stand on ceremony. If you really want to thank me, please make a breakthrough and become an almighty as early as possible. I am excited just thinking about an inverse cultivator at the level of an almighty, the king of venomous worms said. Jian Wushuang could not help but laugh. With the seclusion this time around, my injuries and abilities have completely recovered. Moreover, I have made a breakthrough to stage 3 ultimate real God, and the comprehension of my reincarnation doctrine has achieved the 7th level of the doctrine palace. Furthermore, I have managed to come up with the reincarnation palm by comprehending and studying intensively. In terms of my sword principles, they have also improved considerably. I can say that my gains are really huge. The only thing that I feel is that it is a pity that my comprehension of the spacetime doctrine is still at the top of the 6th level of the doctrine palace. Jian Wushuang muttered. The spacetime doctrine was closely related to the Hongjun golden swords and moon-picking skill. As soon as it made a breakthrough, it would affect his abilities as a whole greatly. However, it was a pity that such a breakthrough was not something that he could achieve even though he wanted it. For example, for the comprehension of the reincarnation doctrine, he was fortunate enough to obtain an opportunity that was bestowed upon him by the one-star man. By comprehending the shocking palm which contained an infinite amount of reincarnation power in his mind, he came to a realization and made a breakthrough as a result. However, in terms of the spacetime doctrine, he did not come across any opportunity. Since my gains are extremely huge, I am satisfied. It's time for me to come out of seclusion. Jian Wushuang laughed. On that very day, Jian Wushuang, who had secluded himself in the secret room for a total of 7,800 years, finally came out of seclusion. For the battle in the Buddhist Demon Sea back then, only a few people who were the higher-ups of the lineage of Star knew about it. However, they did not make this information public. Hence, when Jian Wushuang secluded himself and came out of seclusion, it did not cause any huge commotion. In a cave which was completely composed of special gems, Jian Wushuang and Hall Master Yuan sat together, and there was good wine and delicious food in front of them. Jian Wushuang, congratulations. Not only did you recover from your injuries, your abilities have increased greatly as well, Hall Master Yuan laughed. When Hall Master Yuan saw Jian Wushuang for the first time after he came out of seclusion, he could tell that Jian Wushuang was extremely different from before he had secluded himself. After asking him, Hall Master Yuan came to know that Jian Wushuang had made a huge breakthrough during his seclusion. Before your seclusion, you could destroy the killing formation of 9 cuts that was formed by 5 Sir Gods teaming up. But now, your abilities are definitely stronger. Which level have you really achieved? Hall Master Yuan could not help but ask. I should be invincible among Sir Gods. Even if I were to come across a normal Emperor God, I should be able to fight with him head-on. Jian Wushuang laughed. Invincible among Sir Gods? Hall Master Yuan's eyes brightened up at once. He knew what kind of person Jian Wushuang was, since he had dared to say that. It meant that he was absolutely sure of it. That's great. There's finally another super-existence who can intimidate the eternal chaotic world in the lineage of Star. Hall Master Yuan was over the moon. In the eternal chaotic world, an almighty was already considered someone with great authority. However, to a top, big powerhouse like the lineage of Star, only Emperor God-level fighting capabilities could intimidate everyone. As for Sir Gods, they still did not have the right to do so. Previously, the lineage of Star had only had the Star Palace Master, the only Emperor God. However, due to the secret skill of Star Palace, the Star Palace Master was a huge deterrent. However, putting the Star Palace Master aside, the lineage of Star only had 2 almighties, and they were Hall Master Shi Yun and Hall Master Gu Xian. Moreover, they were only Sir Gods. 2 other big powerhouses who were similar to the Soaring Heaven King Palace, such Sir Gods were not much of a deterrent. However, with the emergence of Jian Wushuang, a top expert who was invincible among Sir Gods and could also compete with Emperor Gods, it was also enough to intimidate everyone. To the lineage of Star, it was something significant. Hall Master Yuan, I came to find you as I wanted to ask you a question, Jian Wushuang said abruptly. Tell me more about it. Hall Master Yuan laughed. You also know that I have achieved the highest level of a real god, and if I were to take another step forward, I would be going for Almighty. However, to make a breakthrough to Almighty, I first need to obtain the training method for the 7th step of an inverse cultivator. Hence, do you know who possesses this method? Jian Wushuang asked. Although Hall Master Yuan was not an almighty, his identity was very special. The big and small matters in the lineage of Star, as well as many matters of the Sanctuary Alliance, were all taken care of by him. Comparing judgment levels, His level of judgment was not inferior to a normal emperor god. Therefore, he would know who possessed the seventh step of an inverse cultivator. The training method of the seventh step of an inverse cultivator? Hall Master Yuan squinted his eyes. After muttering to himself for some time, he nodded his head slowly. Indeed, I know who possesses this method. However, it will be extremely difficult for you to obtain the training method from him. Who is it exactly? Jian Wushuang couldn't help but ask. He was also very curious about in whose hand the inverse cultivation skill was. One should know that real god Wu Bei was also an arrogant Sir God when he was at his zenith. Plus, he had a white blaze fruit tree and also a certain capital. However, real god Wu Bei didn't even stand a chance to see the expert. Who exactly was the exceedingly great person that real god Wu Bei couldn't see even though he wanted to? Jian Wushuang, you have been in Sanctuary Alliance for so long. You should have a certain understanding of the Almighty's in eternal chaotic world, right? Hall Master Yuan asked. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. How about Great Emperor? Hall Master said. Jian Wushuang was stunned. He knew about the Almighty's in eternal chaotic world. That was the truth. For instance, he could immediately recognize Emperor God Shui Gu the moment he used his divine weapon. However, he only knew some of the Sir Gods and Emperor Gods, and he only had a brief understanding of them. As for Great Emperors, Jian Wushuang didn't know much about the Great Emperors. Would the seventh step of inverse cultivation skill be in a Great Emperor's hand? Jian Wushuang asked. Yes, and he isn't any ordinary Great Emperor. Hall Master Yuan continued. Jian Wushuang, you know that Sanctuary Alliance is a definite overlord of eternal chaotic world, and the ones in the highest position in Sanctuary Alliance are the super experts at Great Emperor level. Do you know how many Great Emperors there are in Sanctuary Alliance? Jian Wushuang shook his head. 13 of them. Hall Master Yuan read out a number. Jian Wushuang was surprised. It wasn't because he found the number huge, but there were too few. One must know that Sanctuary Alliance gathered all forces in Eternal Chaotic World and solo experts in the 10 sanctuaries. Just how few there were. Among the 13 Great Emperors, there are masters of the 10 sanctuaries. For instance, Purple Moon Great Emperor of Purple Moon Sanctuary, Colored Glaze Emperor of Colored Glaze Sanctuary, East Royal Emperor from East Royal Sanctuary. Besides the 10 sanctuaries, there are 3 other Great Emperors. Although the 3 Great Emperors didn't conquer any sanctuaries, their individual powers are enough to shake one. Among the 3 Great Emperors, one of them is Emperor Bai. Emperor Bai also has another title. He is the strongest man in Sanctuary Alliance. What? Jian Wushuang was shocked. The strongest man in Sanctuary Alliance? The title was definitely highly valuable. Hall Master paused and continued. Regardless of Sir Gods or Emperor Gods, there is a distance of power in between. Same applies to Great Emperors. Among the 13 Emperor Gods in Sanctuary Alliance, Emperor Bai is no doubt the number 1. His power was widely recognized long ago. Many years ago, at the beginning when Sanctuary Alliance first established, Emperor Bai launched an attack before. He did it in front of the experts and he killed another great emperor with a thunderous method. Killed another great emperor? Jian Wushuang exclaimed. Jian Wushuang, you should know that when one reaches great emperor level, he will be the strongest existence in eternal chaotic world. Since the collapse of ancient times and the first era, eternal chaotic world has never had anyone stronger than a great emperor, while all the great emperors have the ability to split heaven and earth. They possess unbelievably strong power and their defensive skills are impressive. Under normal circumstances, as both parties are great emperors, even if they couldn't be evenly matched, they should be able to stay alive. Just like the other 12 great emperors in Sanctuary Alliance, it would be difficult even for the strongest to kill the weakest. It is almost impossible. Only Emperor White has the capability to kill a great emperor and with ease. Tell me now, does Emperor Bai qualify to be the strongest man in Sanctuary Alliance? Hall Master Yuan looked at Jian Wushuang with a smile. Of course he's qualified. Jian Wushuang nodded heavily. He could kill another great emperor. That itself showed Emperor Bai's power. Hall Master Yuan, as you brought up about Emperor Bai, Would the seventh step of inverse cultivation skill be in the hands of this Emperor Bai? Jian Wushuang asked. You're right. The seventh step of inverse cultivation skill, Emperor White should be the only one in Eternal World that has it. Because he is the one and only inverse cultivator at the almighty level in Eternal Chaotic World. Hall Master Yuan said. What? Jian Wushuang stood up and he looked surprised. Emperor Bai is an inverse cultivator? Yes, Hall Master Yuan nodded. Since the Second Era until now, there were some inverse cultivators, but most of them died during inverse cultivation tests. There are only 2 people who passed all inverse cultivation tests and reached the 6th step of inverse cultivation, who are Real God Wu Bei and Emperor Bai. Of course, you're the 3rd one now and you have already surpassed Real God Wu Bei. If you were to improve further, you might be able to stand side by side with Emperor Bai. It is also because Emperor Bai is an inverse cultivator. That's why he is so ridiculously powerful and terrifying. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists and he was astonished. It was true. Inverse cultivators were ridiculous. He was merely on the 6th step, the 3rd stage of ultimate real God, but he was confident in being evenly matched with an ordinary Emperor God. If he were to improve further, reach the 7th step of inverse cultivation, and become an almighty, his fighting power would easily reach the great Emperor level. If his comprehension of Heaven Way were to enhance slightly and reach the level to be compared favorably with an ordinary great Emperor, he would be able to kill a great Emperor of the same level with ease at his advantageous position as an inverse cultivator. Emperor Bai had obviously reached that level. Jian Wushuang, it's needless for me to tell you how amazing Emperor Bai is. His title as the strongest man in Sanctuary Alliance should reveal that. Emperor Bai is also an ancient existence. His antiquity is far beyond your imagination. There are even rumors that said that he is an expert from the First Era. Such an ancient almighty doesn't have any relatives or disciples and is unrestrained. Although he carries the name of Alliance leader in Sanctuary Alliance, he never bothered about the internal affairs. Forget about real God Wu Bei, even the Emperor gods in Sanctuary Alliance and the great Emperor experts on the highest position hardly see him. It is said that among the other 12 great emperors, only 2 of them have his communication token. In other words, even great emperors find it difficult to look for him, Hall Master Yuan said. Jian Wushuang's face grew solemn after he heard that. He definitely had to look for Emperor Bai if he wanted to get the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill. However, it wasn't easy to look for him. It was not easy for even great emperors to find Emperor Bai, let alone Jian Wushuang. Moreover, even if he were to find Emperor Bai due to his nature-defying luck, would Emperor Bai give him the method for the 7th step of an inverse cultivator for free? After all, as soon as Jian Wushuang obtained the method for the 7th step of an inverse cultivator, there was a high chance of him becoming an almighty-level inverse cultivator in the future. Moreover, there was also hope for him to achieve a level similar to that of Emperor Bai. If Emperor Bai had some selfish motives, he would definitely not give the method to Jian Wushuang and allow Jian Wushuang to pose a threat to his position. Looks like I can only rely on opportunities in the future to obtain the training method of the 7th step of the inverse cultivator, Jian Wushuang muttered. However, due to real God Wu Bei's warning from before, Jian Wushuang had long prepared himself for such results. Oh right, Hall Master Yuan, there's another matter which concerns the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom, Jian Wushuang said abruptly. The monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom? How is the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom related to you? Hall Master Yuan said with surprise. It's like this. When real God Wu Bei gave the training method of the 6th step of an inverse cultivator to me back then, I promised him that I would kill the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom on his behalf if I were to possess the abilities to do so. Jian Wushuang said, Since I have made a promise, unless I have no abilities or no way to do so, I will not go back on my words. Jian Wushuang would not make promises easily. However, he held promises in high regard. Back then in Wu Bei's cave, since he had promised real God Wu Bei, he would always hold it firmly in his mind. Previously, he had not had enough abilities. However, things had changed. I see. Hall Master Yuan understood and said, The monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom is a ruler of many holy kingdoms, and his reputation is not small within the eternal chaotic world. Moreover, he is a member of the Sanctuary Alliance. As for his abilities, he is a top Sir God expert. With your current abilities, if it were 1-to-1, it would be possible for you to kill him. However, the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom's background is not simple. Background. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. Regarding the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom's abilities, he already knew about it previously. However, he did not know about the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom's background. Hence, he was asking Hallmaster Yuan to get to know some background of the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom. Jian Wushuang, just now, I told you that within the Sanctuary Alliance, apart from the masters of the 10 sanctuaries, there are 3 other great emperors. Putting emperor by aside, among the 2 remaining great emperors, there is a great emperor Zisu. Among the 13 great emperors, Great Emperor Zi can be considered one of the top 5. Moreover, the relationship between the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom and Great Emperor Zisu is not normal. It is said that when Great Emperor Zisu was still a real god, he owed the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom a favor. After that, he became a great emperor, and the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom has been serving under him ever since. If you wish to kill the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom, you have to get past the level of Great Emperor Zisu, Hallmaster Yuan said. Upon hearing that, Jian Wushuang was stunned. Previously, he had known that the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom had a great background. However, he did not expect his background to actually be so deep-rooted. With such friendship with a great emperor, and that Great Emperor Zisu owed him a favor, if he were to come across any danger, Great Emperor Zisu would definitely come to rescue him personally. Moreover, if he were to avenge real god Wu Bei by killing the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom, there would be a high chance of Great Emperor Zisu coming personally to kill him. Seems like I will be unable to take revenge for real god Wu Bei for another short period of time. Jian Wushuang shook his head. He had promised to help real god Wu Bei take revenge. Moreover, he would only do so when he had the abilities, and he had to also be in a situation where he was sure that he could stay alive. However, at that moment it was obvious that his abilities were not enough. At the very least, I must wait until I have enough things to capitalize on that I can face Great Emperor Zisu. Then, I will be able to take action against the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom for real. Jian Wushuang murmured. Jian Wushuang, it is impossible for you to kill the monarch of the Demon Heart Kingdom now, and I believe that you would not be so stupid. Hallmaster glanced at Jian Wushuang and continued speaking. Since your abilities have fully recovered, what do you plan to do next? Next? Jian Wushuang could not help but raise the corners of his mouth. I want to demand the payment of a debt. Demand the payment of a debt? Hallmaster Yuan was stunned. The Soaring Heaven King Palace? That's right. Jian Wushuang nodded his head earnestly. To begin with, there is a huge grudge between me and the Soaring Heaven King Palace that is unresolved. Moreover, outside the Buddhist demon sea back then, they almost killed me when I was seriously injured, and I remember this debt extremely clearly. Hence, I must absolutely think of a way to get them to repay me. It's easy to say that. However, the abilities of the Soaring Heaven King Palace are not normal. Do you have the confidence to deal with them? Hallmaster Yuan said with concern. Don't worry. Since I dare to demand the payment of a debt, I naturally have absolute confidence. Jian Wushuang laughed. Hallmaster Yuan, you definitely have a better understanding of the Soaring Heaven King Palace than me. Please tell me what kind of experts the Soaring Heaven King Palace have, as well as some of the trump cards that they possess. With this, I will be more prepared. Jian Wushuang knew about some experts of the Soaring Heaven King Palace. However, he did not know all of them. No problem. Hallmaster Yuan said immediately. According to the information that the lineage of Star has collected, there are a total of 11 Almighties in the Soaring Heaven King Palace. Among the Almighties, 9 of them are Sir Gods, while the remaining 2 are Emperor Gods. Upon hearing that, Jian Wushuang's eyes could not help but shrink. The Soaring Heaven King Palace was a top powerhouse of the eternal chaotic world as well, and it was no wonder that their ways of doing things had always been so unreasonable. It seemed that they were unreasonable due to their absolute abilities. An Almighty was strong enough to be called someone with great authority in the eternal chaotic world. However, the Soaring Heaven King Palace actually had a total of 11 of them. It should be known that a similar top powerhouse like the lineage of Star only contained 3 almighties. By including Jian Wushuang, who possessed the fighting capabilities of an almighty, there were only 4 of them. Compared to the soaring Heaven King Palace, they were indeed lacking a lot in terms of numbers. If not for the Star Palace Master with the soaring Heaven King Palace's abilities, they would probably be able to suppress the lineage of Star completely. For the 9 Sir Gods of the soaring Heaven King Palace, there are some with strong abilities, as well as some with weak abilities. In particular, there are 3 of them who stand at the top of the Sir Gods. As for the 2 Emperor Gods, they are Emperor God Tianling and Emperor God Tianxiao. These 2 Emperor Gods are the oldest existences in the soaring Heaven King Palace. At the same time, they are also the 2 founders of the soaring Heaven King Palace. Among the 2 of them, Emperor God Tianling is the stronger one. Emperor God Tianling has been famous for a long time, and he became famous a lot sooner than our palace master. Moreover, his abilities long ago achieved the peak of an Emperor God, and he is slightly stronger than the palace master. In the eternal chaotic world, he is also a well-known super expert, Hall Master Yuan said. Jian Wushuang frowned. The current him could compete with Emperor God experts head-on, and if he were to encounter Emperor Gods at a similar level to Emperor God Xuegu, he would not be fearful at all. However, if he were to encounter a top Emperor God, he would not have absolute confidence. Fortunately, Hall Master Yuan said again, Emperor God Tianling is proud and ambitious. Ever since he achieved the peak of being an Emperor God, he has been trying every means to go for Great Emperor. Moreover, it would definitely be impossible to make a breakthrough to Great Emperor if he were to rely on his own training. Therefore, there is a need for him to look for opportunities. As such, for many years, Emperor God Tianling has been traveling in the second layer, and he will only return once every hundreds of thousands of years. Oh! Jian Wushuang was interested. If Emperor God Tianxiao were to be wandering in the second layer, he had no scruples. How about Emperor God Tianxiao? Jian Wushuang asked. Emperor God Tianxiao has been in a commanding position in soaring Heaven King Palace all this while. He hardly wanders in the lairs or dangerous places while his power is far weaker than Emperor God Tianling's. Emperor God Tianling is on the top among Emperor Gods while Emperor God Tianxiao is merely intermediate among Emperor Gods. Intermediate? How about if he is compared to Emperor God Xuegu? Jian Wushuang asked. He should be weaker compared to Emperor God Xuegu. However, Emperor God Tianxiao has 2 chaotic divine treasures. In particular, there is 1 defense armor. Hence, you can't belittle him either, Hall Master Yuan said. 2 chaotic divine treasure? One of it is even a defense armor. Jian Wushuang was surprised and astonished at the abundant treasure that Emperor God Tianxiao had. One should know that Emperor God Xuegu only had 1 chaotic divine treasure, which was the Crimson Trident. Besides the higher-ups, soaring Heaven King Palace is a top force that is powerful in eternal chaotic world after all. You shouldn't belittle the trump cards that they hold. If you fight with them head-on, you should be cautious, Hall Master Yuan exhorted. I understand. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly as he already made up his mind. Although Emperor God Tianxiao had 2 chaotic divine treasure, he alone couldn't make Jian Wushuang worried. As for the other Sir Gods, he couldn't be bothered. He needed to be concerned about the trump cards that soaring Heaven King Palace had. Jian Wushuang, I have to remind you that soaring Heaven King Palace is much stronger than Lineage of Star. Although, due to the Master of Star Palace, soaring Heaven King Palace didn't have the guts to declare war against Lineage of Star. If we of Lineage of Star were to take the initiative to taunt them and corner them, it would be a different story. So, if you want to take revenge on soaring Heaven King Palace, you can only do it alone. We of Lineage of Star can't help you on the surface. Of course, when it reaches a crucial moment, such as your life being threatened, I will tell the Master of Star Palace to get involved personally. Hall Master Yuan sounded solemn. You have boundless prospects and you are significant to Lineage of Star. If you were to be in danger, we of Lineage of Star would definitely go all out to protect you, even if it means war against soaring Heaven King Palace. I understand. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. Ever since Jian Wushuang had fought with soaring Heaven King Palace, Lineage of Star had never once had a conflict with Soaring Heaven King Palace in public. It had only been Jian Wushuang fighting with Soaring Heaven King Palace alone. It wasn't because Lineage of Star wasn't willing to assist Jian Wushuang, but because Lineage of Star was at a difficult position. If it wasn't necessary, Lineage of Star wasn't willing to get involved. The moment they got involved, they would definitely break apart with Soaring Heaven King Palace. By then, it would drag up too many affairs. After he got to know more about Soaring Heaven King Palace, Jian Wushuang immediately departed. One of the 10 sanctuaries, Colored Glaze Sanctuary. Colored Glaze Sanctuary was considered a more spacious sanctuary in the 10 sanctuaries. There was a total of 8 huge continents. Among the 8 continents, Soaring Heaven King Palace took up 2 of them. The 2 continents were where the lair of Soaring Heaven King Palace was located, also the deep-rooted Soaring Heaven land. The other one was Sea Continent. The original overlord of Sea Continent wasn't Soaring Heaven King Palace but a strong force that could compare favorably to Lineage of Star. However, the force experienced an accident whereby their strongest emperor god passed away as he wandered in the 3rd lair. Without their emperor god, the force naturally couldn't remain as the overlord of Sea Continent. Immediately, there was a war. As the force was destroyed, Soaring Heaven King Palace on Soaring Heaven Land got involved arrogantly and defeated the other forces in Sea Continent. Since then, Soaring Heaven King Palace had become the overlord of Sea Continent. Soaring Heaven King Palace had even left a strong power in Sea Continent as a deterrent to all enemies. The power was concentrated in the middle of Sea Continent where Soaring Heaven Mansion was located. As Jian Wushuang came to take revenge, he definitely had to come to the territory that Soaring Heaven King Palace had conquered. Between Soaring Heaven Land and Sea Continent, Jian Wushuang opted for the latter. Sea Continent, a huge bustling city that was floating in the air. The city's name was Sea City. On Sea Continent, it could be named as Sea City. Its importance could be well imagined. In the entire Sea Continent, only Soaring Heaven Mansion could be compared to the flourishing city favorably. In an exquisite restaurant in Sea City, Jian Wushuang sat in his crimson robe and carried his sword on his back as he read the set of information that he had just received. Vientiane Tower Treasure Auction? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Interesting. Vientiane Tower was absolutely the #1 chamber of commerce in Eternal Chaotic World. They possessed boundless treasures and rare books. Vientiane Tower on every continent in 10 cultivation sanctuaries would throw a treasure auction every once in a while. The treasure auction was huge. Many forces and sects on the continent, including many solo experts, would participate. Jian Wushuang had just happened to make it in time for Vientiane Tower treasure auction in Sea Continent. The treasure auction was going to take place in Vientiane Tower in Sea Continent 10 days later. I want to take revenge and I have to strike at the experts of Soaring Heaven King Palace. However, the experts are scattered all around Sea Continent. It won't be easy to find them. However, Vientiane Tower treasure auction is such a major event, even Soaring Heaven King Palace will definitely send influential experts to participate. This happens to provide me a great chance. As for how I want to do this, Jian Wushuang was in deep thought, but there was suddenly a commotion outside the restaurant. Jian Wushuang spread his soul power and he saw a few figures flying over from the void afar. The few of them had ferocious auras that were already at the level of chaotic real god. The one who was leading was a top chaotic real god. The commotion outside the restaurant was stirred by their arrival. At the same time, Jian Wushuang found out the background of the few figures via eavesdropping the conversations around him. Thunder Rolls Palace. A strong force in Sea Continent, but they don't have any almighty in commanding position. The leading one among them is the top chaotic real god, the master of Thunder Rolls Palace. Jian Wushuang tapped the table with his finger as the corners of his lips lifted into a smile. When he saw the master of Thunder Rolls Palace, he already had a plan in his mind. Then Jian Wushuang immediately moved and got close to the few chaotic real gods from Thunder Rolls Palace. 10 days later, the Vientiane Tower's treasure auction began as scheduled. Just like the past, the treasure auction this time around had attracted many powerful, big powerhouses from the Sea Continent. Moreover, as the overlord of the Sea Continent, the Soaring Heaven King Palace had also sent experts over. Furthermore, the experts that it had sent over did not have low positions. Real God Xuekong, I did not expect you to actually come to the treasure auction personally this time around. Haha, brother Xuekong, long time no see. I trust that you have been well since we parted. Greetings to real God Xuekong. At the site of the Vientiane Tower's treasure auction, the person who was flattered and escorted by everyone was a gray-robed old man. The gray-robed old man was real God Xuekong from the Soaring Heaven King Palace. He was not just an elder who had a lot of power in the Soaring Heaven King Palace. Instead, his abilities were shocking as well, and it was rumored that he could compete with experts in the real God ranking list. Among the experts from the Soaring Heaven King Palace who came to participate in the treasure auction this time around, he was their leader. While being flattered by everyone, real God Xuekong and some experts from the Soaring Heaven King Palace went to their independent rooms. When they sat inside their independent rooms, they could see everything that was occurring outside clearly. At the same time, they could also see the treasure exhibition stage. The auction treasures in the treasure auction of the Vientiane Tower have always been outstanding. However, I wonder what treasures will be auctioned off this time around. It's a pity that the Vientiane Tower's treasure auction has always had tight security. Even the Soaring Heaven King Palace has no prior knowledge on the treasures. Two real gods of the Soaring Heaven King Palace were having a random conversation. However, at that time, real God Xuekong snorted coldly. No matter what treasures are being auctioned off by the Vientiane Tower, as long as it is something that catches the Soaring Heaven King Palace's eyes, it shall be ours. Upon hearing that, the other experts of the Soaring Heaven King Palace around him laughed. Indeed, with the Soaring Heaven King Palace's power and high-handedness, if a treasure were to catch their eyes during the treasure action, they would definitely be able to obtain it. In no time, the treasure auction began and the first treasure was up for bidding. The first treasure was a real god-level Chaos Divine weapon. Although it was armor used for defense, it did not catch the attention of the Soaring Heaven King Palace at all. On the contrary, experts from other powerhouses fought for the treasure for quite a period of time. Time passed by and many treasures went up for bidding. At the start, the Soaring Heaven King Palace was silent. Only the first 20 treasures had come out. Humongous White Sun Elixir. It's something that is quite rare. Real God Xuekong muttered to himself and he spoke loudly, 1,000 doctrine gems. Real God Xuekong's voice spread across the area from the independent room that he was in, and the whole treasure action became quiet at once. The humongous White Sun Elixir was valuable and it would be of some help to top chaotic real gods. For its price, not to mention 1,000 doctrine gems, if one were to come across someone who really needed it, even 2,000 doctrine gems would not be considered a lot. If it were someone normal who gave the price of 1,000 doctrine gems, someone else would definitely compete with him. However, at that time, the Soaring Heaven King Palace was the one who gave the price. In the treasure auction, many experts from each and every powerhouse or sect could not help but look at the independent room that real God Xuekong was in. However, they shook their heads immediately and it was obvious that they had already decided to give up on competing. 1,000 doctrine gems. Calling once. 1,000 doctrine gems. Calling twice. The expert from the Vientiane Tower who was hosting the bidding competition was shouting loudly. However, just as he was about to call for the third time, 1,100 doctrine gems, a deep voice could be heard abruptly. Eh? Experts from many powerhouses and sects in the auction looked for the source of the voice immediately. They saw that the voice also came from an independent room. The people in that independent room should be the people from the Thunder Rolls Palace. The Thunder Rolls Palace? A mere Thunder Rolls Palace actually dares to compete with the Soaring Heaven King Palace. Who knows? Perhaps there is someone in the Thunder Rolls Palace who really is in need of the humongous White Sun Elixir badly. Some experts started to discuss it. Although the Thunder Rolls Palace was a big powerhouse within the sea continent, there were sects which could rival or were even stronger than the Thunder Rolls Palace. Moreover, those sects were also interested in the humongous White Sun Elixir. However, since the Soaring Heaven King Palace had given a price, they naturally gave up. However, for the Thunder Rolls Palace to do this, everyone could only come to the conclusion that the Thunder Rolls Palace indeed had someone who needed the humongous White Sun Palace badly. In the independent room where everyone in the Soaring Heaven King Palace was, real god Xuekong looked in the direction that the Thunder Rolls Palace was and laughed apathetically. The Thunder Rolls Palace has always revered the Soaring Heaven King Palace, and they would absolutely not dare to oppose us. Forget it. It's only one humongous White Sun Palace. Since they need it, we shall give it to them. Real god Xuekong did not lose his temper, and he stopped bidding for the humongous White Sun elixir. With that, the humongous White Sun elixir fell into the hands of the Thunder Rolls Palace at a price of 1,100 doctrine gems. The treasure auction continued. In no time, another treasure caught the attention of the Soaring Heaven King Palace. 2,500 doctrine gems. Real god Xuekong said right away. All the powerhouses and sects in the auction came to a mutual understanding and gave up on competing immediately. However, from the independent room that the Thunder Rolls Palace was in, a deep voice could be heard again. 2,600 doctrine gems. With that, real god Xuekong's eyes squinted. As for the experts of all the powerhouses in the treasure action, all of them were extremely surprised. For the humongous White Sun elixir previously, perhaps someone in the Thunder Rolls Palace had really needed it. Hence, they had bid for it even though there was a risk of them offending the Soaring Heaven King Palace. However, at that moment, for the second treasure that had caught the attention of the Soaring Heaven King Palace, the Thunder Rolls Palace still wanted to compete for it? Would it be so much of a confidence for the Thunder Rolls Palace to happen to need both treasures that had caught the attention of the Soaring Heaven King Palace? 2,800 doctrine gems. Real god Xuekong spoke again. However, that time around, his voice was a bit deep and low. 3,000 doctrine gems. A deep voice could be heard again from the independent room of the Thunder Rolls Palace. Real god Xuekong's eyes finally turned ice-cold. Thunder Rolls Palace. Interesting. Real god Xuekong murmured, and he stopped competing. As for the other experts of the Soaring Heaven King Palace around him, their expressions were a bit cold as well. The treasure auction continued. The treasure auction was indeed held by the Vientiane Tower. The prices of all the treasures that they had taken out were extremely shocking, and quite a number of treasures had caught the attention of the Soaring Heaven King Palace. Moreover, every time real god Xuekong of the Soaring Heaven King Palace gave a price, the Thunder Rolls Palace would compete with him by giving another price. Moreover, no matter how high the price that real god Xuekong gave was, the Thunder Rolls Palace would always give a price that was higher than his. The treasure auction was halfway done. During this period of time, there was a total of 12 treasures that had caught the eyes of the Soaring Heaven King Palace, and they had also bid for them. However, for these 12 treasures, none of them fell into the hands of the Soaring Heaven King Palace in the end. Instead, all of them were obtained by the Thunder Rolls Palace. The Thunder Rolls Palace had only obtained those 12 treasures. In other words, the Thunder Rolls Palace would only bid for treasures that had caught the eyes of the Soaring Heaven King Palace. As for treasures that had caught the eyes of other powerhouses or sects, the Thunder Rolls Palace would not be concerned with them. What were they doing? In the treasure auction, the experts from all the powerhouses and sects were all extremely stunned. Some of them even cried out in alarm. The Thunder Rolls Palace is really fearless. There were so many forces and sects that participated in the auction, but Thunder Rolls Palace didn't bother with them. But whenever Soaring Heaven King Palace shouted a bid, they immediately joined and competed in bidding. They were obviously asking for trouble with Soaring Heaven King Palace. Thunder Rolls Palace? Are they crazy? Crazy, they must be crazy. Thunder Rolls Palace must have increased in power tremendously, and they are getting carried away. TSK. I think Thunder Rolls Palace is courting death. They openly provoked Soaring Heaven King Palace. If I were to be real god Xuekong, I would immediately destroy Thunder Rolls Palace right when the auction ends. There were people whispering to one another. The experts from various forces and sect were waiting to watch a show. Of course, they were also people whose eyes were dilated in curiosity. They faintly noticed that it wasn't as simple as it looked. The few experts from Soaring Heaven King Palace gathered, and they didn't look too good. Only the leader among them, real god Xuekong, flashed a bloodthirsty smile. It seems like we of Soaring Heaven King Palace has not launched an attack for many years, and the outside world already forget how scary Soaring Heaven King Palace is. Even a nonentity has the guts to provoke us in public. Humph, Thunder Rolls Palace doesn't even have any experts on real god ranking list, let alone an almighty. Such a sect, Soaring Heaven King Palace, can destroy them in an instant. Wait till the auction ends, we shall immediately take action. First, kill all the people from Thunder Rolls Palace who came to join the auction. One of the chaotic real gods from Soaring Heaven King Palace said. No, it's not as simple as you think it is. Real god Xue Kong smiled maliciously. What does Thunder Rolls Palace have that gave them the courage to provoke Soaring Heaven King Palace? Their palace master isn't that stupid. If he dares to do so, he definitely has a backer. There are only a few of us. It's best that we don't act recklessly. How about this? Master Qi Xing happens to be nearby. Let me send him a message for him to make a trip here personally. With Master Qi Xing, no matter who Thunder Rolls Palace's backer is, he will be able to settle. The few experts from Soaring Heaven King Palace nodded heavily at his suggestion. They were confident in Master Qi Xing. Then, in the independent room that all experts were paying attention to, the few real gods from Thunder Rolls Palace stood. Their faces were as pale as sheets and they were shivering in fear. Mister, the one that we offended is Soaring Heaven King Palace. The Master of Thunder Rolls Palace muttered. In front of the Master of Thunder Rolls Palace, there was a young man in a crimson robe carrying a long sword on his back. The person was naturally Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was enjoying his cup of tea leisurely. He smiled when he heard what the Master of Thunder Rolls Palace had said. Why? Master of Thunder Rolls Palace seems to be afraid. Of course I am. The Master of Thunder Rolls Palace said. Soaring Heaven Jing Palace is one of the biggest forces in eternal chaotic world. They have a total of over 10 almighties. Anyone sent could destroy Thunder Rolls Palace completely. On Sea Continent, Soaring Heaven King Place is king. Thunder Rolls Palace have always been respectful. The Master of Thunder Rolls Palace looked bitter. Soaring Heaven King Palace was a big figure to Thunder Rolls Palace. If it wasn't because Jian Wushuang had forced him to, he wouldn't have had the guts to provoke the former. But then, he had no choice. The few of their lives were in Jian Wushuang's hands. They couldn't even struggle. They could only obey what Jian Wushuang wanted them to do. Don't worry. Soaring Heaven King Palace isn't as scary as you imagined. Plus, if the experts of Soaring Heaven King Palace were to barge in here, I would take care of them. As for you, just telling them you were forced by me will do. At most, apologize to them. There won't be anything major, Jian Wushuang said. The Master of Thunder Rolls Palace looked even more troubled. One should know that Soaring Heaven King Palace had always been barbaric. Thunder Rolls Palace had offended them so badly. Even if there was a reason, it wouldn't be something that could be solved with an apology. Don't worry, follow my instructions. Whatever treasure Soaring Heaven King Palace wants, get it for me. Jian Wushuang continued to enjoy his tea. The Master of Thunder Rolls Palace gulped. Although he wasn't willing to, he could only follow Jian Wushuang's instructions. However, Soaring Heaven King Palace seemed to take the hint. The rest of the treasure they never bid anymore. Hence, the Master of Thunder Rolls Palace naturally couldn't fight for it. Very soon, the biggest treasure auction on Sea Continent ended. The experts from various forces and sects walked out from Vientiane Tower. The moment they walked out from Vientiane Tower, they were shocked at the sight in the void before them. In the void outside of Vientiane Tower, there were over 10 figures floating. The figures had strong auras. The weakest was an eternal real god, and most of them were chaotic real gods. Real god Xue Kong was in the crowd too, but he wasn't the leader of the crowd. The leader was an elderly with white eyebrows who was standing at the far front with a snakehead staff. He was standing there in silence while he squinted his eyes. The elderly with white eyebrows didn't give out any aura. He was the least eye-catching one among the figures. However, that person was the reason the experts at the scene looked terrified. It's old monster Qi Xing, Sir God Qi Xing from Soaring Heaven King Palace. He's an almighty. An almighty came personally. Thunder Rolls Palace is doomed. As expected, soaring Heaven King Palace is not one who could be provoked as he wishes. An Almighty came personally and he could easily destroy Thunder Roll's palace. Outside of Vientiane Tower, countless experts stopped. They didn't leave and the scene became noisy. Whoever participated in that treasure auction knew that Thunder Roll's palace had taken the initiative to provoke Soaring Heaven King Palace. According to Soaring Heaven King Palace's manner of handling things, how could they tolerate that? At the treasure auction earlier, Soaring Heaven King Place didn't do anything as they were concerned about Vientiane Tower's reputation. But then, judging by the looks of it, the moment the experts of Thunder Roll's palace exit, they would immediately be killed by Soaring Heaven King Palace. Under the anticipation and attention of all experts, the few real gods from Thunder Roll's palace walked out of Vientiane Tower slowly. The person leading them was the master of Thunder Roll's palace, who looked bitter. The moment they walked out from Vientiane Tower, the master of Thunder Roll's palace felt dry in his throat when he saw over 10 figures and Sir God Qi Xing at the forefront before him. He suppressed his fear and said, "Thunder Roll's palace? Lei Tao? Greet Sir God Qi Xing and everyone from Soaring Heaven King Palace. Lei Tao, in the eyes of your Thunder Roll's palace, is there Soaring Heaven King Palace?" Real God Xuekong looked down at him from above. The master of Thunder Roll's palace wanted to say something. Sir God Qi Xing's eyes suddenly opened wide and there was a flash of light.